the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, online and on your smart speaker. Quality journalism, analysis and opinion that speaks for itself. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Hello, I'm John Pienaar with Drive on Times Radio. Thanks for joining me. Well, there's going to be a doctor's strike over Christmas, and it's not at all clear why. I don't mean that it's a mystery why resident doctors are still in dispute with their NHS bosses. Now, you may believe they ought not to be striking at all. Most people do seem to feel that, though not everyone, and we can't be at all sure the doctors will accept the latest deal. They may not. But after the BMA leadership acknowledged the latest offer from the Health Secretary Wes Streeting was enough to pass the threshold of being enough to ask doctors' opinion, well, why not suspend the Christmas strike while BMA doctors give their opinion? Streeting is apparently furious about that. How do you feel? Send me a text, 87222. Start with the word Times or a tweet to @Times Radio. And a bit later on the programme, now US forces have stormed and seized a Venezuelan oil tanker in the Caribbean. What is President Trump trying to achieve? The official line, of course, is it's about tackling drug trafficking, sponsored by the Maduro regime. But is it, though? Is that what it's about? There are powerful American fleet vessels offshore in the Caribbean. Is it, as some suggest, about regime change? Is it about oil? Well, let's have a look at that on today's show. First, though, the BMA has responded to the government's latest offer to avert a Christmas strike, calling it a mixed bag. So where do we go from here? Speaking in Norwich just a bit earlier on, the Prime Minister expressed his concern over the prospect of Christmas strikes.
I'm very concerned with the action of the BMA. They are being irresponsible, in my view. We have already put in place quite a significant pay rise. There are other issues that they're concerned about, which we've been listening to, and we put an offer on the table to deal with those issues. But that offer can only go forward if they don't take strike action, particularly in the run-up to Christmas, particularly when we've got a problem with flu. It would be irresponsible of BMA to push through. And I think for many resident doctors, I think in their heart of hearts, they probably don't want to do this.
That's Keir Starmer speaking earlier. So let's say good afternoon to Dr. Layla McKay, the Policy Director for the NHS Confederation. Hi to you.
Hello.
Welcome to the programme. Tell me, do you feel remotely optimistic about this dispute coming to an end with this latest offer?
Well, I think that is certainly the hope of healthcare leaders across the whole country. The resident doctors have asked for various things, and it does seem as though those requests have been addressed in quite a significant degree in the offer that has gone forth. So I think that everyone is just crossing their fingers that the resident doctors will call off this strike, because to go ahead at this time of the year with the huge pressures, with flu rising, it feels like a very, very difficult choice. Right.
Okay. And I wonder what your feeling is about that, having, got a sense of the feedback from NHS trusts and elsewhere in the NHS network. I mean, I've spoken to people in the NHS, including bosses, the head leader of a health trust, of a big health trust, who was saying that the number of doctors observing the strike call was not very high. A lot of people were simply not observing that call to strike. And maybe you're taking from that some evidence that the doctors are losing their appetite for the fight. They may just be coming over to the side of seeking peace. Is that your sense of it?
Well, it can really vary depending upon where you are in the country. And of course, the problem is that until the day, you don't actually know how many people are going to go on strike. So the hospital managers have to assume that it will be a certain number and work really hard to figure out how to safely staff the hospitals, making certain assumptions about how many people might go on strike, because that cannot be known until that moment. So it certainly is very disruptive, it's very expensive, and a lot of planning has to go into this, which, as you can imagine, in this very busy time of the year, everybody really wants to be focusing on how to deliver the best care as efficiently as possible.
Yes, and as we hear, you're having to suspend and postpone procedures and operations because it looks as if the strike is going ahead. The BMA had the option, of course, to suspend the strike over Christmas. That was the hope of the health department, and go ahead and survey their members on what they think about the latest deal on the table. But they've chosen not to do that. They're going ahead with the strike anyway, with all the disruption and pain that's going to call. Now, that's being called shameful by West Streeting. Do you agree with that? Do you consider that it is shameful behaviour by the BMA?
Well, it just makes sense for the BMA and its members to be properly considering what appears to be an offer that does meet many of their demands. And the responsible thing will, of course, be to assess that properly and make those choices accordingly. And that's certainly what everyone is hoping, that we can find an end to this and some kind of resolution, because anything else, it's bad for patients, it's bad for staff, it's bad for the whole health system. And we do need to move on past this.
I mean, how do you characterise the attitude of the BMA leadership itself? I mean, they would argue they're concerned for the welfare of the NHS and, of course, for their members. They're now being seen by some, depicted by some, as militants, as causing trouble out of a sense of wanting to cause trouble. Is that fair?
Well, they certainly do have particular things that they are trying to achieve, and they're pushing very, very hard to get those asks to be delivered. And the government is working very hard to meet them part way. And I think that really, at the moment, the government is open to conversation. And when a government is ready and open to conversation, then it feels that that conversation should be being had before reaching straight for the option of a strike. So certainly my message would be to all of those who are thinking about striking right now, see whether there is a solution and a way forward through discussion and through figuring out how to get some of those things that they're asking for by working effectively with the government to make that happen.
All right. The flu epidemic, it looks like it's going to get worse, doesn't it? What's going to be the impact of the next strike, the Christmas strike, on the NHS as the flu numbers go up?
Goodness, well, it's just adding pressure upon pressure at a time that is already destined to be a very difficult time for the NHS. As you know, the winter often is a difficult time, but what we are hearing right now is that those flu numbers are climbing. They are climbing in a more significant way than you would usually expect at this time of the year. And because it has come a bit earlier than usual, fewer people have necessarily been able to get their vaccination in time. Now, of course, you can still get your vaccination. It takes about a couple of weeks to kick in. So get it today, be protected in time for Christmas. But ultimately, there are a lot of people who are being quite significantly affected. It seems to be a flu strain that can cause a particular amount of illness. And right now, the numbers of people who are infected is rising. Today, we got the figures that it's 55% higher than it was last week in terms of people in hospital, and there is no obvious peak to that coming at this moment. So we are expecting those numbers to continue, and the forecast suggests that it could in fact go up to the highest number of people ever in hospital with flu this year. So time will tell, but certainly across the health service, people are worried and they are planning accordingly.
Well, that is deeply alarming. Dr. Leila McKay of the NHS Confederation, thank you. Now, let us welcome to the programme Leila Moran now, the Liberal Democrat MP who is chair of the Health Select Committee at Westminster. Hello, Leila.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi. Do you consider that the latest offer from the Health Secretary to the resident doctors is a reasonable basis for settlement?
Broadly, I do. But of course, they need to go and consult their members properly. And I really regret the timing of this more than anything else. I mean, the right to strike is important in this country. It's something worth protecting. And also, it's worth saying, resident doctors, many have contacted me saying that it's not just about pay, it's also about conditions, their future. They're doing this because they feel that they have to. But what I would say back to them is we know the pressure. We've just heard very extensively from Leila McKay, all the pressures on the NHS currently on top of this massive reorganisation that the government has undertaken. This is just not the time, is the point that I would make to them. There was an offer to extend the time that they could consult, not just 48 hours, in fact, into January. That would have been the sensible thing to do because they could still have striked at that point if they wanted to. Yes. But it would have been beyond the peak that we're expecting for flu, COVID and hospital admissions, which we're expecting circa middle to third week in January. So it would have meant they could still do their democratic right if they want to,
yes.
although I would hope that they could settle by that point. But it would also mean that they're not leaving a lot of their colleagues in the lurch. So my plea to them is call it off now. Have a cool-headed look at what is in front of you. This doesn't have to be the end if you don't feel it's enough, although I think strikes really are not the best thing, particularly during winter, and come back to the table. There is still time for them to do it. They could still call this off.
Yes.
And every single member of my committee who spoke up in the statement about this yesterday, we were all of the same voice. This is absolutely not the time.
Right. So you've been talking to the BMA. You rightly say it was perfectly open to the British Medical Association to suspend the strike, not do it at Christmas, while they're consulting their members about the latest offer to them, and they've chosen not to do that. You can help us. I mean, clear up what, for me at least, is a mystery. Why are they not suspending the strike while consulting the membership? That doesn't mean necessarily accepting it, because they've got an option later to reject it and strike, but they're not suspending the strike over a terrible period of Christmas. What's your understanding, Leila, of why they are doing that?
We don't have a full understanding.
But you've been speaking to them, Leila. What have they been telling you by way of testifying?
Well, no, they haven't told me their reasons why they haven't. I'm not in direct contact in the last 24 hours since this offer has been made. So I don't have an intel on that. You'd have to ask them, I'm afraid. But, I mean, I think what worries me, though, is it makes them and also resident doctors more generally look unreasonable. And as we know, over the last few years, people really trust our NHS professionals. They have huge sympathy for them. We all love our NHS and want the best for it. And what I worry about the way that the BMA are conducting themselves over this is that actually they're squandering public support at a time when we need as much public support for the NHS and turning it around as we possibly can. So I do genuinely think they are making a strategic error if they go ahead with these strikes in the next...
OK, I think I'm clear on where you're coming from now, but just to remove any shred of doubt, you say going on with the strike at Christmas makes them look unreasonable. Does that mean you consider that they are being unreasonable?
Yes, frankly. I mean, look, we're at a point now where the NHS is in crisis this week, and we know that the peak is going to hit in January. But it's not just this peak. There is then knock-on effect, because for every appointment that had to be delayed, for every doctor that had to do an extra shift, that creates extra burnout, that creates extra activity that has to happen further down the line. So the long tail of the consequence of this strike isn't just for the next few weeks, it's beyond. So I would say to them, striking right now is unreasonable. It's for them to decide if the terms that they have been offered is sufficient for their members. But what I think is also unreasonable is they're not even going out and asking them. There is an off-ramp to this, and I just hope that they can see this from the point of view of their patients. I know many of them think they're doing this for their patients. I get that, and they feel like they've got nowhere else to turn, and they tell me that. But I would just say to them gently, when I'm speaking to people on doors about this very same people who would defend them any other time are seeing what's happening in the NHS, particularly in the next few weeks, are scared, are worried, are desperate for them not to go ahead.
OK. Look, you sum up a position where the BMA are surveying their members, as it's called, and on the basis of a survey of opinion, they'll decide whether or not to have an actual vote. I mean, given the attitude of the BMA, which is pretty militant on any definition, do you think the BMA leadership, so heavily criticised as they have been by the Health Secretary, can they be trusted to fairly reflect the attitude of the membership? They are taking a survey and then making their own decision on whether to go further with a vote. Can we trust them to make the right choice and leave it to the doctors to make a democratic final decision?
I sincerely hope so. And I think it's important that we don't take the attitude that all of them are approaching this, and certainly the resident doctors who are approaching this aren't doing so in good faith with good reasons. But I also hope they will listen to reason. I would also hope that they will publish the findings of that survey, and if they decide that they are not going to call it off, that was an emphatic 80+% responding that that's what they wanted to do. At that point, we are in a different situation. But there is a very good offer there on the table. There's also legislation to come. And there's also a workforce plan that is in train. My committee are really interested in this. We've already started taking hearings on it. The big changes in the NHS that are coming, they are right to be frustrated. So many other parts of the NHS workforce are frustrated with the lack of planning, with the lack of value that they feel, especially post-pandemic. All of these concerns are legitimate concerns that need addressing. But my question, again, to them is it this week that they need to put this pressure on everyone else?
Okay.
I think not.
Now, last question. You then agree with the Health Secretary, and obviously you say the BMA are wrong, simply wrong to strike over Christmas. They could just consider the members' opinion and carry on working at least over Christmas. You think the offer looks reasonable as it is. Is there a worry then behind all of this that you fear that the relationship of trust between people, NHS patients and doctors could be broken by this?
I don't think broken, but I think it's already as a result of the prospect of these strikes waning. I think when I'm speaking to my residents, I've been doing it today, they are not supportive of this. They support the right to strike. They support our doctors. They understand that life is tough for them and they do have sympathy, but then they look at it in the round and the timing of this is making them question some of that. I would absolutely think that there will be a knock-on effect, hopefully not in the longer term, but in the short term, for how the public view the BMA and resident doctors. And I don't think that's worth doing. I don't think that is a price worth paying for these strikes. So absolutely, they should be thinking about their patients and their relationship with them as they do this, but also the relationship with the other staff that they're going to be putting pressure on.
It's a pretty stark warning. Leila Moran, Liberal Democrat, Chair of the Health Committee at Westminster, thank you so much for talking to us. Now, coming up, flu is on the rise. So what do we do about it? We're going to be looking also at how you play your part in the Times Christmas appeal. And coming up, what is Donald Trump really thinking when it comes to Venezuela? It's now 4:20. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Now, tensions between the United States and Venezuela are at a new pitch after the seizure of an oil tanker. Venezuela accusing Washington of blatant theft, describing the move as an act of international piracy. So let's say hi to Benoit Fosson, the security correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Hi to you, Benoit.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Always welcome, Benoit. So now we see, well, attention at a new height, the Trump administration ramping it up. You've got a powerful American fleet in the Caribbean. Recent days, you've had the President of the United States warning that the skies over Venezuela should be cleared. This is surely about a lot more than just tackling drug trafficking.
I mean, yes. I mean, you would argue that the entire region, has a drug problem in the sense of production in Colombia, departing routes, not just through Venezuela, but also Colombia, Ecuador, and other countries really in the northern part of South America. And of course, transit through, for Central America. So you would argue Venezuela is not the only place where, the US could have a problem with a point of origin for drugs. But obviously, it has a disadvantage of being an ally of, several of the US foes, for instance, Iran, China, Russia, which has probably a more complex relationship with the US, and being a very sort of left-wing, leftist, regime. So for all these reasons, it ticks all the wrong boxes. And now, obviously, the US is escalating pressure on this regime because so far President Maduro has shown no sign of leaving.
Okay, and with that powerful fleet, the American fleet in the Caribbean, what sort of action is being contemplated, is being discussed as perhaps coming in the next stage?
Well, we had to ramp up in a way that because we initially attacks on small vessels that are trafficking drugs, out of Venezuela into the Caribbean on their way to the US. Now we have a seizure of a large tanker, part of at least 30, so-called shadow fleet tankers that bring, for instance, oil products, into Venezuela, or bring, crude outside Venezuela under sanctions. So that's been an escalation. But the key point is the administration has threatened to attack Venezuela targets inside Venezuela, and that's not happened so far. So they clearly hope that it will trigger a response from Maduro and maybe a negotiation for him to leave power.
Right. So to try and basically push Maduro, the effectively a dictator of Venezuela, just to quit and maybe take safe passage elsewhere and hand over power. The deeper motive behind all of this, I know this is largely a matter of calculation and speculation, Benoit, but I'm keen to hear yours. Of course, we see Venezuela has enormous oil reserves, and it wouldn't be entirely cynical, would it, to imagine that those oil reserves would be on the president's list of things he wants to acquire for America.
Absolutely, but we've seen the example with Russia, which is the opposite example, where you have negotiations, with Russia as part of the peace process, whereby the discussion is for lifting sanctions on Russia for American companies to access its, giant oil and gas reserves. So the alternative would be for Trump to lift sanctions on Venezuela, get full access. There's already US companies like Chevron in the country, and get full access to these supplies, which are critical for the US because they supply a large, most of these Venezuela production actually goes to US refinery, and some of them owned by Venezuela. So it would be much simpler to lift sanctions.
Interesting, yeah.
So that kind of complicates this argument that this is a war about oil.
Yeah, well, Maria Corina Machado, interesting too, that she supports the idea of Donald Trump intervening and helping to see off Maduro. I mean, she's clearly been talking to the American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and she's explicit about her hope for a change in Venezuela pushed and driven by President Trump.
Except the issue is that Maduro, is kind of hunkering down. 1 minute being very discreet, the other one going public, with lots of security around him, lots of protection against potential snipers. But he's showing no sign of, endorsing the plans that have been proposed to him, which is to leave potentially either to Madrid or to Turkey and have some kind of amnesty or protection for him and his family. I mean, there's been repeated approaches by various countries, obviously including the US, for him to leave power. And so far, what we understand is he thinks it's still bluster, that nothing serious is going to happen on him. Obviously, that could change, but that scenario so far has not been considered by Maduro, despite the immense pressure that he's under.
Okay, so the tension goes on. We wait to see what happens in the next stage. Benoit Fossard at the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much, Benoit. Now, today, it is your chance to speak to your favourite Times journalist. Lines are open for this year's Christmas Appeal phone-in. The Times and the Sunday Times is raising money for 3 charities. Switchback, which provides mentoring to young men leaving prison. Kissing It Better, which brings younger and older people together to fight loneliness. And World Bicycle Relief, which gives bicycles to people around the world to help them access education, healthcare and jobs. I'm joined now in the studio by Sian Bradley, who's been leading the reporting on the Times Appeal. Hi to you, Sian.
Hi.
So, how's it been going? I was there with you taking calls earlier on, which was a lovely thing to do. How's it been going today?
It's been going great. We had our little Christmas lunch cracker in there to kind of bring the festivities. But yeah, it's been great. We've had lots of people calling in to say how much they love Times Radio, and only one person with some presenting advice for Stig Abel. So I think overall that's some pretty good odds.
Do you want to share the advice?
He talks too fast.
Really?
Stig said he does agree. So
well, we do listen as well as talk. I'm sure he listened to that. Now, who's there now to talk to?
So at the moment we have Robert Crampton, Daniel Finkelstein and Roya, the royal editor. So yeah, we've got a good... Oh, and Fiona Hamilton, I think, is still there. The chief reporter, she actually went to a region in remote Colombia to write to meet people who'd been helped by World Bicycle Relief. So yeah, she did meet people who had been able to go back to school because they had a bike. People who completely changed their lives and their livelihoods in this region.
It's good news. Now, what can readers expect to happen over the weekend?
So this weekend we will have an interview with Tom Blythe. He's an actor who is in an upcoming film called Wasteman, and that film is actually involving prison leavers that have been working with Switchback. So they were involved in the consultancy and also in the acting of the film. And Tom talks about kind of the process, what that's been like. We'll also have an interview with the CEO of World Bicycle Relief, to explain a little bit more about the founding story and how they got to where they are today.
All right, Sian Bradley, thank you, and well done with the appeal, and good luck for these coming hours and days.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, latest for you from the markets. I'll talk to our colleague from the business desk, and we're going to be looking at whether popping a mask on really will help us get on top of the rising flu crisis. And here's a question: will we ever get a really reformed House of Lords? We'll talk about that. Now the headlines at 4:30 with Tom Noonan.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Now, I just want to remind you of an exciting competition on Times Radio in association with Thomas Fargiers, who makes some of Britain's finest biscuits. This Christmas, you can celebrate the season in style with a Yuletide trip you won't forget. We're giving you the chance to win an enchanting 3-night Christmas getaway for two, and that's in either Vienna, Prague or Copenhagen. And the experience includes flights, luxury hotel, accommodation, dinner and £500 spending money. Now, to win something special, thanks to Thomas Fargier's excellent biscuits, simply go online and search for Times Radio competitions. You'll find there the entry form on the website. An entrant will be selected at random from all the valid entries, and the competition closes at midnight on Sunday, December the 14th. All the terms and conditions are there for you online, and good luck with that. Time now is 4:34.
Times Radio Business News.
And welcome to the programme. Emma Powell from the business desk of the Times. Hi Emma, what's new in the markets?
Hi John. Yeah, so a bit of a mixed day for equity markets in London and New York after last night's interest rate decision from the Federal Reserve. So FTSE 100 on course to close about 0.5% higher, but the S&P 500 down about 0.3% in morning trading over in the US. That's probably due to some caution from the Fed last night. So of course it cut rates, but it was divided in its decision, which could mean that they're unlikely to fall further in the long term.
Okay, and Bitcoin, some news on Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin down almost 3% today to below the $90,000 mark. Investors seem to be taking a bit more of a risk-off approach. This is likely to be because of Oracle, which is led by Larry Ellison, one of the world's richest men. It's missed its profit and revenue outlook forecasts, and its executives have also flagged higher spending, which could be a sign that investment in AI infrastructure is not quite turning the profits as quickly as investors might have hoped.
All right, and just a word on the outgoing boss of GSK, saying apparently that the United States and China are the best places to do business, not the UK.
Yeah, comments from Emma Walmsley, outgoing boss of GSK, interpreted perhaps as a bit of a dig at the UK sort of business environment. So she said US is still the leading market in the world in terms of the launches of new drugs and vaccines, but also saying that China is the best market in the world to do business development.
All right, Emma Powell, thank you. Emma Powell from the business desk. Thank you for joining us.
Times Radio Business News.
Now, please wear face protection. Sounds familiar to you, doesn't it? The UK has seen such a rise in the number of flu cases just in the last couple of weeks. The NHS is warning it could be facing, and we've been hearing more of that on the programme, the worst case scenario this Christmas. Doctors have been told members of the public need to wear face masks if you are symptomatic. But should we have to wear face masks? Let's talk about that. Thorin Govind is a pharmacist and health expert. Hello to you, Thorin.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's concerning that we've not even reached the peak of flu season yet, and we are already hearing calls about critical incidents at hospitals.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers, well, beds are being taken up as soon as they become vacant. There's really worry about strain on our hospitals. And from your colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry and elsewhere, they're seeing the strain up and down the system.
Absolutely, very, very busy with people asking for flu vaccines. I think the key point is here, so flu season is from mid-November until mid-February. If you haven't had your flu vaccine, it's important to have a conversation with a healthcare professional, chat through that for you as an individual. And it's obviously free for those who are over 65, pregnant, immunosuppressed. So a good majority of people will be able to access this free of charge.
Right. Now, look, the head of the NHS providers, you'll have seen in the news, he started a controversy when he said people must wear face masks, a suggestion which caused a good deal of confusion about the status of health advice. It's about what is a demand and what is a suggestion. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've all got a part to play in looking after ourselves as individuals, thinking about how we manage ourselves when we are ill. One would hope that if you're not feeling too great, you wouldn't be spending too much time. Maybe you need to make sure about where you're spreading your germs. I think it's one of a number of things in our armour, just like we need to make sure we're washing our hands, catch it, bin it, kill it when we're sneezing. Obviously, when we come to face masks, I understand that, there's been a huge amount of thought about this during COVID. We know that modern offices ventilated, so it's quite a great environment for viruses to be around. With your flu vaccine, it takes 14 days to kick in.
Yeah, well, indeed, it's a slightly uncertain line to you there, Thor, and I'll persist. We can carry on and get clearly what you're saying. So far, we are, I think, managing to get your point, which we're very, very keen to do. And as you say, after COVID, this did become a particularly difficult issue for health professionals. A tough debate between what seems sensible and what offends people's sense of personal choice when it comes to measures, including wearing face masks. And the whole issue seems to have got entangled along the way into the culture war. What are your thoughts on that?
I do think it has become a culture war. I was actually chair of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society as we were coming out of COVID, and there was a big debate about whether masks should remain in healthcare environments. I think we've all got to do our best and recognise that every extra pressure on the NHS is perhaps one that it may not be able to tolerate, and that's why about individual responsibility can support the wider good.
So the answer, from your point of view, is the Prime Minister was earlier on saying that it wasn't an order, it was a suggestion. Wear face masks and you'll reduce the risk. So it needs to be very clearly stated in those terms, doesn't it? Because it's easy to confuse people.
Yes, it is easy to confuse people. I think it comes down, again, though, to if you're feeling unwell, making sure that you perhaps aren't circulating and spreading your germs to other people. And also, cold and flu, generally, making sure that you're prepared. Now, prescriptions, you need to be thinking about ordering your repeat prescription. There are some people who are more vulnerable to flu, like those who are immunosuppressed and those who have chronic underlying conditions. So it may be that those people may benefit more from wearing masks as well.
All right, Thorin Godwin, pharmacist and health expert, thank you. I wonder what you think about this, because different people will have different views on this subject. From the health professionals that we hear from now are saying, look, it seems just common sense. You can reduce the risk with a face mask if you feel you're symptomatic or for whatever other reason makes sense to you. It gets more complicated when you appear to be trespassing on people's feeling of free will. As I say, it has become drawn into the culture war. But I want to know what you think about all of this. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, and share your thoughts. Or maybe a tweet to @Times Radio. Or you can send us an email to studio@times.radio. Now, coming up after 5, a former NHS Trust chairman is going to be talking to us about what the resident doctors might do next, what would be wise for them to do next as another Christmas strike approaches. And I'm going to be talking to a former US congressman as the House in Washington passes a huge defence bill. And why Lapland is full of festive cheer and quite a few soldiers. And next, why the House of Lords reform never really seems to get started, does it? Let's talk about that too. It's now 4:42. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive.
across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
The Prime Minister yesterday named another 25 Labour peers. It's about trying to curb a Conservative majority in the House of Lords. But as the number goes up, whatever happened to Labour's big plan for House of Lords reform? Let's talk to Lord Burns, who is an independent crossbench peer in the House of Lords and formerly the top civil servant at the Treasury. Lord Burns, welcome to you. Lord Burns, are you with us?
I am, yes.
It's good to have you here. Let me ask you then, first of all, you're welcome. So we've got 25 new Labour peers, 3 for the Conservatives and 5 for the Liberal Democrats. So we get inevitable, of course, protests from the Tories and louder ones from Reform, who don't get any peers. Lord Burns, what are your feelings about this?
Well, I'm not at all surprised because, at the time of the general election, the Conservatives had a considerable lead over Labour in terms of the number of seats. Indeed, today, I think, including the hereditaries, they probably are, 70 or more seats greater in the Conservative side. And so it's always been evident to me that there would have to be some balancing up as we went through through this Parliament. And that's basically what's been happening. I mean, even after this list, the Conservatives will still have a significant number of people more than the Labour Party. It's a very, what happened during the previous 14 years or so was, of course, there were many more Conservative peers appointed than Labour peers because this is in the hands of the Prime Minister. The Prime Ministers in this country can choose how many people to appoint to the House of Lords, and they can choose which parties they should come from. And not surprisingly, what they do is appoint people disproportionately from their own side.
Yes.
And then, then you find there's a change of government, a new party comes into office, and they have considerably fewer members than the opposition.
Yeah. So the latest appointments are in keeping with past precedent. Labour won at the last general election. They want more certainty of getting their job as far as possible. But the Lords are often described, aren't they, as a check on the overweening power in the Commons. Yes. And the government doesn't always get its way in the House of Commons, but it does have a huge majority. Is it the job of the Lords to counterbalance that?
It is, and that is always the case, because, of course, there are a considerable number of crossbench peers, and, of course, there are also the Liberal Democrats, so that even when the Conservatives had a considerable lead over Labour, they did not automatically win votes. And so there has to be a process of discussion, and there has to be a process of trying to come to agreement about things. And normally the government gets its way. For example, I was in the House last night as we were going through the final stages of the Employment Rights Bill. There have been many amendments down against the government, but the process is now going on, and this is more or less sorted out now. The government will have its way.
Right now,
but it's had to fight. It's had to fight to get its way, and it's had to make some compromise.
It is such a fight, and it always has been. I mean, reform of the House of Lords has been tried and failed again and again since the early 20th century, since before that. And a big problem is that agreement on reform is very hard to get. There are deep disagreements, not just between parties, but within parties, and that has more than once held up the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I've been working on this actually for the last 9 years. I was chairman of a committee that was appointed by the Lord Speaker to try to find a means of getting the size of the House down and to have a better balance between the parties. But as I said at the beginning, the fundamental issue with the House of Lords is the power of the Prime Minister. And therefore you get... it never seems, for whichever Prime Minister it is, this never seems to be the right time to do it, because they've got other priorities. Their priority is to get their legislation through Parliament.
Yeah, look, whoever's in power, if they try this, it is a nightmare, isn't it? Because it just gobbles up parliamentary time, which at any given time, there are other higher priorities.
Yeah, well, of course, we've spent some time in the past, since the general election, on the question of the hereditary peers, and that bill is going through Parliament. At the moment, it's in the Commons. It will no doubt come back in the new year. There is also the leader of the House of Lords has also suggested that once this bill goes through, there will be a committee formed to look into the other two commitments that were in the Labour Party manifesto, which was to have an age limit and also to have a participation requirement. And so my expectation is that there will be a committee set up in the new year which will be looking at those two features. But of course, it doesn't change the underlying problem that if prime ministers keep appointing people to the House, it will remain very large, and there will always be this problem about imbalance unless we have some formula which determines the number of people who should be appointed to each of the parties.
Yes, I mean, there'll be more committees, there'll be more ideas, some of them very sound ideas, but you have to wonder, will anything really ever happen? The public, you ask...
Well,
there have been changes, but you ask the public, Lord Burns, about the House of Lords, and most of them will say, look, I'm in favour of change. Things they don't want it very much. They don't care very much.
No. I mean, the House of Lords does not really enter into the picture for many people. You know, it's an important part of the Constitution. It's an important part of actually really scrutinising legislation and challenging government and make government sometimes think again about things. But it doesn't really, as I say, impinge upon most people's lives. What does happen, however, is there's quite a lot of bad publicity often about, A, the size of the House, and secondly, the fact that it's well known that attendance rates are probably only, half of what the maximum number of people who are able to attend.
Yes.
And, this generates a certain amount of bad publicity. But, it has a job to do. It's a limited job in some ways, but, it's scrutiny. It's trying to make sure that the legislation is in good shape. Nowadays, legislation goes through the House of Commons with guillotine very often. Very often large parts of bills are not properly scrutinised before they are sent along to the Lords. And it's left to the Lords to really scrutinise those bills and to highlight where they think there are inconsistency or it isn't going to work or there are problems in one way or another. And so it does play a part, but it's in a sense, it's a role that's somewhat under the radar as far as the population as a whole is concerned.
That's very true. Sometimes I used to go to quite a few House of Lords debates, and they were very, very good debates, as I recall. Most people never noticed what was going on there most of the time. Lord Burns, there, independent peer. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Now, there's new research from the consumer champion which found traditional budget airlines might not be as cost-effective as people believe. Which revealed that many airlines, like Ryanair, EasyJet, displayed cheap prices for things like cabin bags. Not true when it came to the reality of flying. Now, Laura Jackson is the Times Deputy Head of Travel. Hello to you, Laura.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for coming. And tell us a bit more about this. I mean, we've seen the ads for, come and travel on X whatever it is, airline, and you can get a really cheap deal on extra baggage. Not the case when you get to the departure gate.
So what this report from our colleagues and friends over at Which is highlighting are the hugely varying costs here from the three budget biggies. So that's EasyJet, Ryanair and Wizz. And what we're talking about here are cabin bags. So those are the ones that go in the overhead lockers, and it's about the cost to take those on board. So all budget airlines will let you take a small underseat bag for free. But these cabin bags, those are the ones that quite often there are different sizes and there are really huge variance in cost. So EasyJet says that their cabin bags range in price from £5.99 up to £48. Now, Which has searched 520 flights on EasyJet and they could not find a bag for £5.99. The cheapest that they could uncover was £23.49. Now, if you're at the top end of those cabin bag prices, you could be looking at adding a good £50 to each flight. So that's £100 round trip. So that £40 trip to Berlin becomes a little bit less attractive once you've added those costs on. And it's important to note that all of the airlines, Wizz, EasyJet and Ryanair have come back to us, and they have said that their prices are transparent and that they are really aiming to make sure that there is a range of prices. Obviously, it looks to me like those prices go up the more people are booking those cabin bags, so it does look like there's responsive prices. But it looks like really the advertised price of £5.99 is certainly rare, if in existence at all.
If in existence at all. Are we talking about these budget airlines then in some cases just, I don't know, pulling a fast one?
Yeah, I mean, what is really interesting is that Which have looked at 1,500 cabin bags across Europe for a number of destinations on different dates. And in only a handful of cases, they've actually managed to find those cheapest rates. So, for example, on Ryanair, they found the cheapest rate in just 0.3% of the time. The average fee that they found there was £20.50. Well, Ryanair advertised their lowest price at £12. And what happens in a lot of cases with budget airlines is you're having to buy add-ons. So you're also getting your speedy boarding or your priority boarding, which will allow you to add that extra cabin bag in the overhead lockers. So
what's the advice then to travellers to get a reasonably good deal?
Well, my top tips, to be honest with you, John, are check in your luggage, get a hold bag if you can. So I'm off tomorrow with Wizz Air, I'm off to Ryanair, I've got a check-in bag, it's cost me a few pounds extra, and I've now obviously got a really big bag that I can take. I'm going Christmas market shopping. What I really need are lots of woolly jumpers. I don't really want a cabin bag. So I do think there's a particular set of problems and circumstances around, travelling in winter. And then other things, really, make sure you've got a tape measure. Make sure that you are measuring it properly. Every single one of these airlines has slightly different measurements. And obviously you're not really considering that when you're buying your luggage in the first place. Get an at-home scale. That's my top tip. It's not just the budget carriers. On Austrian Airlines the other day, they were weighing people's bags. If it was over 8 kilos in the cabin, then you had to put it in the hold. And then lastly, I do a sort of Russian doll thing where I put bags in bags. So I'll have a small bag with my passport and my phone, and then I will tuck that into a rucksack so I can take that one small free bag on and get best value that way.
Sounds like really good advice. Laura Jackson, Times Deputy Head of Travel. Thank you. Now, Uber Eats has launched autonomous delivery robots. It's in Leeds. They're working with Starship Technologies to bring pavement roaming couriers, wandering, bleeping, rolling around the city. The firm say the battery-powered bots will help meet the rising demand over the busy winter period, and they'll reduce the need for car journeys. So there we are, new normal, robots delivering what you need to your door. Is that really what we want? Now, we're talking about this in the office just before the programme. Not everyone was of exactly the same view. Maddie Wilson, our producer, for example, had a view of her own. Maddie, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I don't mind seeing the idea, because I haven't had it happen to me yet, but I quite like the idea of a robot wheeling up to the door and giving me a takeaway meal. Seems very neat, and it appeals to my sort of Star Trek sense of modernity. But you don't take the same view, do you, Maddie?
Absolutely not. I think that the main reason I don't like it is I think it completely takes us away from any sort of human interaction, and it undermines it completely.
Part of me really likes that point of view. It's nothing remotely like me, Maddie, because I open the door when the bell goes, I say number 65, and then thank you, and the guy is gone. So a robot isn't a huge difference from that. But there's something appealing about the idea of a delivery of a takeaway meal, or something from the local Indian restaurant with a bit of human action.
Definitely, and I think we love going out and eating with our family and friends. So I think that should all be around, this nice feeling. But I think if it's a robot, how are you going to have that human interaction? How are you going to have that nice feeling around?
Yeah, you obviously like a good chat on
Love
the doorstep.
A good chat,
the guy brings your vindaloo or whatever it happens to be, and you have a good old natter.
Yeah, I love to. I think it's great. I think it's it's part of being human. I think that it's nice that we can all chat. I mean, it's sort of, if you look at self-checkouts, that's completely taking it away from talking to shopkeepers or whatever, because that's now that's a robot in itself, really, in the way that you don't actually say, hi, how's your day, or anything like that. Yeah. You're
obviously a naturally warm human being, Maddie. So when you're chatting to the guy from whatever delivery service it happens to be, do you start the conversation, or
definitely?
Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you do it? I mean, how's your family? It's cold out, isn't it?
It's cold out. Oh, always the weather, John. Always got to talk about the weather.
So it's like -5 degrees.
Yeah.
And there you are at the doorstep telling the driver, hang about, I'm going to talk about the weather a bit more.
Absolutely.
It is chilly. Now, don't go back to your bike yet. Tell me more about how, that's a nice warm scarf. Where did you get your scarf? That sort of
Yeah, definitely. I'll always say, cold out, or what are you doing later, or what are you having for tea.
Yeah. You make the world a warmer place.
Oh, great.
Let's come in again and talk any time.
Definitely.
This is Times Radio Drive. After 5, we've got a good deal coming up for you. You will want to stay with us and listen to.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
It is 5 o'clock. I'm John Pienaar with Times Radio Drive. Here are the headlines. Volodymyr Zelensky says the US has talked about turning the east of Ukraine into a free economic zone as he submits new peace proposals. And the Prime Minister says the doctors' union is being irresponsible by not calling off a strike because of rising flu cases. And coming up, West Streeting attempts to stop a Christmas walkout by resident doctors while also getting tongues wagging at Westminster about him talking down his own government and party leader. We'll get you across all of that. And we'll find out why Lapland is to be the home of, well, presumably Santa Claus, but also a great many soldiers this Christmas. And is dark chocolate the way to feel and get younger?
across the UK on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, online and on your smart speaker. Quality journalism, analysis and opinion that speaks for itself. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
It's great to have your company on Drive on Times Radio. I'm John Pienaar. Well, a doctor's strike in the middle of a flu epidemic. That sounds bad. When it happens at Christmas, it's worse. But when it leaves the NHS struggling to do its job in a climate of simmering rage, open hostility between the Doctors' Union, the BMA and the Health Secretary, resentment from a growing section of the public after being hit by strike action in support of a bigger pay demand than any other group in the public sector, well, it's about as bad as it gets. In a moment, we'll get the thoughts on all of it from the former NHS Trust Chairman, Roy Lilly. I do wonder what you are thinking. Send me a text, 87222. Start with the word Times or a tweet to @Times Radio. Dr. Shivam Sharma, he's the Deputy Chair of the BMA's Resident Doctors Committee, was asked on Times Radio Breakfast if there's a chance that it would be called off.
Well, be up for members to decide, but ultimately this
what do you
is
think?
This is a ballot on both pay and jobs, and to resolve a dispute, both things have to be fixed. So members will have to decide, but I do find it difficult to see members accepting this offer.
That's a pretty grim prognosis, Dr. Shivam Sharma of the BMA. And speaking in Norwich a bit earlier on, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, expressed concern over the prospect of Christmas strikes coming up.
I'm very concerned with the action of the BMA. They are being irresponsible, in my view. We have already put in place quite a significant pay rise. There are other issues that they're concerned about, which we've been listening to, and we put an offer on the table to deal with those issues. But that offer can only go forward if they don't take strike action, particularly in the run-up to Christmas, particularly when we've got a problem with flu. It would be irresponsible of the BMA to push through. And I think for many resident doctors, I think in their heart of hearts, they probably don't want to do this.
That's irresponsible then, according to the Prime Minister. Shameful, according to the Health Secretary. So afternoon to Roy Lilly, who's an analyst on health and a consultant, and a former NHS Trust Chairman. Roy, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, John. Good evening.
Hi, good to have you here. Now, we're going to come to the obviously worrying impact of the doctor's strike at what is a really bad time in just a moment. But it does look, doesn't it, as if relations between doctors, leaders and the Health Secretary are about as bad as they've ever been. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they are, John. And I watched Wes Streeting in the House of Commons making his statement to the House last night. And, you know, when you're in the middle of difficult negotiations, you have to be kind of careful, really, what you say. You don't want to start bad-mouthing the other side or making a bad situation worse. But he went straight in and said, I think the BMA is throwing petrol on the NHS and throwing in a match. And, you know, all throughout this very unpleasant strike, Streeting has been very sort of bullish in his dealings with the BMA. He's obviously, you know, hacked off with them. And it's pretty obvious that he doesn't really know what to do next. I mean, my advice to him would be to go to ACAS and get himself out of it and try and get some neutral person in there, some interlocutor to be able to negotiate some end to this. But I just think that the principles of negotiation are not to antagonise the people you're negotiating with. So I think he's brought that on his head.
All right. So you think Wes Streeting has misjudged this and has made a bad situation worse?
Yes, I do, really. I mean, it is a bad situation, and we all know, don't we, that the economy is in a mess. We all know that there isn't enough money around, and we all know that any negotiated settlement is going to take time. You know, maybe it's a 3-year deal or something like that. But I just think, my experience over years of negotiating things, as both in the NHS and in business, is, you've got to find some mutual ground, and you've got to connect with the people that you're negotiating with. Otherwise, you just stand there and shout at each other. So that's really not been helpful. And as this is a time where the BMA, John, it's not like the organisation it was when I was running a hospital. To be honest, the BMA used to be a bit of a gentleman's club where you could go for a decent lunch. And it wasn't ever really a trade union. But of course, it was taken over last year or the year before by a group of young doctors called Doctors' Votes, and they took over the BMA quite legitimately, simply by turning up, getting themselves voted onto committees and so on, and they changed the whole complexion. And they said, we're fed up with the BMA not doing anything in our best interest, so we're going to take it over and do it ourselves. And that's how it really all started, and now we have a much more militant group of young doctors that are prepared to go out on strike. I mean, years ago, you'd never ever think about a doctor going on strike. It was just impossible to even dream it. But now, of course, they've done it, and we're in the 14th strike. So they're different people, John.
Yeah, and the belligerence then, Roy, it's certainly not just on one side, just from what you say. The Christmas strike did not need to go ahead, did it? The BMA had the option of consulting their members on this latest offer and still keeping open the option of striking later in the new year if the members wanted to do that. But they chose not to. I don't see why.
Well, they put it to. I think basically they want to carry on striking. That's my reading of it.
Yeah.
And I think they put it to their members. And now, the next question is, well, what do we think the members are going to say? Well, look, this strike really, although it's about conditions and job opportunities, and that's very important, the strike is principally about money. And what is on the table now does not include any money. And I think that the members, I'm not at all optimistic that when they consult their members, and they've only got really up until the weekend to do it, I'm not at all confident that the members are going to say, OK, we'll put the brakes on and then we'll go through Christmas and come in again after Christmas. The BMA's mandate for striking ends in January.
Yes.
So after that, they'd have to go out to rebalance. But I'm not at all confident that the members will vote to stand this down. And
on what do you base that? Because we are told that a pretty reasonable proportion of BMA doctors are not following the strike call. One trust I was speaking to said maybe a third of doctors were going into work anyway. They were managing 90% of services. Are you sure? Do you feel sure that the doctors are, as you say, as militant as their leaders?
As sure as I can be, John. I mean, not all junior doctors are a member of the BMA. That's true. And not all junior doctors have supported the strike. There's been an argument over the numbers. There were some numbers that were published in the newspaper, and the BMA produced a different set of numbers about the number of people who are actually on strike. But in a sense, it doesn't sort of matter. If the hardcore are going to say, no, we want to carry on, then they'll carry on. And even if, it's only, in inverted commas, a third of doctors, it's still a hell of a lot of doctors out of a system that's really struggling on waiting lists, really struggling through what is going to be a pretty nasty winter.
Yeah, but it would need 51% of doctors, wouldn't it? There needs to be a majority.
No, it would need 51% of doctors if they go out to after the January period, if they went to go for a new strike. But they're in the current envelope and they're just consulting within the envelope.
Oh, exactly. So it's not a real survey of opinion.
No, it is.
It could be just a taste of hardline opinion.
Yes, that's why I don't really want to say, well, I think the strike will collapse. I'm not at all sure it will, because, as I say, there's nothing on the table about money, and it was money that really brought them to striking in the first place.
All right, Roy Lilly, analyst at the Health Service and a former NHS Trust chairman, thank you so much. Now, Wes Streeting, the aforementioned, is at the centre of a lot of political attention today, not just because of the doctors' strike. Anna Mikhailova is our political editor at Times Radio. Hello, Anna.
Hi, John.
Hi. So, well, there's an interesting interview then in the New Statesman magazine. I've had a look at it myself and it really is interesting.
It really is. It's incredibly wide-ranging. That's the first thing to note. So it's not Wes Streeting talking about his brief. And he makes some incredibly punchy interventions about the direction of the government and the strategy of Number 10 and the way that Keir Starmer effectively is running things. I mean, that is how... There's no other way to read it, particularly. Yeah. But he talks about his frustration at the Labour leadership's practical technocratic approach. Now, we know that one of the big frustrations with Keir Starmer from the people around him has been these private complaints that he is a train without a driver, a sort of much more too technocratic, not giving the salesbit enough. And one other thing that really struck me from Streeting's comments is some of them in terms of what he said about the government's record. So he says that the government has done some things that he's proud of, but he doesn't feel like the message is being sold properly. Now that is almost verbatim what unhappy MPs tell me. So there is a certain type of MP that I think that is designed to really signal to. It's a complaint that I hear so much from people who actually say, you know, we feel like we've done this and we've done that, and they roll off these things, and they say not enough is being done to sell that, to talk about it, and they get very frustrated about the way Keir Starmer has focused on things like the attacking, the not attacking reform, these sort of lurches in different directions instead. And Streeting makes the point specifically that with reform, he says that if this approach continues, that reform will be the beneficiaries in the next election.
And presentation, that is one of the key functions of government. And presentation means rallying your own party, but also getting the country behind the vision of the country that you present. He's essentially being accused of falling down on all those fronts, which, as you say, we've heard over and over again, is the unspoken worry of Labour MPs. There's this phrase, isn't there, of the government functioning like a maintenance department. That is truly damning. It casts essentially the Prime Minister as a kind of machine minder. You know, the machine's ticking over. He's in a white coat, you know, putting on screwdrivers and spanners, and not actually leading or driving or doing anything much by way of leading the whole thing.
Quite, and Streeting makes the point in this interview that they have to bear in mind and be very alive to the fact that members of the public and voters may approach this as normal consumers. So if you've got one maintenance department, it's quite easy to then get another one involved and give them a try. Therefore, you are losing that loyalty to politics. I think, you know, just to give the defence of what would be said within Number 10 about that, that is a symptom of politics as a whole, and voters changing, and the way people approach politics and being much less tribal as a whole. I think it would be extremely unfair to blame that personally on Keir Starmer, whatever you think of him, but it is fascinating to hear Streeting make that point, particularly, John, let's not forget the political context. Just yesterday, the official leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, in PMQs accused Starmer of being a caretaker Prime Minister.
Yes.
So then the next day, I mean, the timing of it, to have Streeting, one of your key frontbenchers, make these maintenance department comparisons, it's not going to help.
No, look, maintenance, man, isn't that far away from being a caretaker, is it? Now, you've been talking to Conservatives, Anna, who have, let's say, crossed the floor. They're not in the House now, but crossed the chasm, as it was, to the Reform Party. They're not all happy.
Crossed the floor, leapt into the abyss, whatever you want to say. So all of this was sparked by yet another defection to Reform, announced Ben Bradley, who was a former Tory MP, former Tory Vice Chairman. He's coming over, and he's going to be given a role in their Elon Musk-style Doge of trying to, manage and simplify things. But off the back of that, because, there are so many discussions constantly by a certain group of Conservatives, usually former MPs, who are, thinking, should we jump? Should we make the leap? We like some of the things that Nigel Farage is doing. We're not happy with some of the things that the Conservative Party is doing. Should we just go for it? And one of the things that holds people back is when they speak to some of the Tories who have gone, those Tories, and I don't want to speak for all of them, but I know that some of them certainly feel like they've been used for a one-day headline by Reform. They're since then just not being used much, just sitting around, not really given a role, and that makes Conservatives doubt whether or not it's worth doing, because of course, for each of those individual people, whatever we say about politics, this is their career and this is their life, that they have to the personal comes in so much with these decisions. And it's just been very interesting observing the experience those former Tories have in Reform, and you do have to think, is that a tactical mistake Reform's making? Are they slightly, almost treating them like discarding them, and treating them with not enough respect, and could that hurt them in the future? Or is this just because they can do it because they're so far ahead in the polls, and there is a feeling that Nigel Farage is so close to power that this almost becomes a byproduct of it.
Well, there's also, I suppose, a possibility that too many Conservatives, who've lost in the last election or whatever it happens to be, crossing over to Reform, makes them look like a repository for Conservatives who have been washed up by the process.
Yeah, which is one of the big criticism that Labour's trying to land. What Reform say to that criticism is they almost say that some of those Conservatives coming over are almost not haven't been invited, and it's just part of the tidal wave that Reform is sweeping them up. So they to that say that some of them are ones that have just taken the decision to leap over themselves and bought membership and announced it, which is always quite amusing. There will be some of that, but I think Danny Kruger obviously has a key role. He is currently developing a lot of their policy offerings and their constitutional plans, and trying to get them ready for government. And Nigel Farage is certainly more interested in trying to tempt people over who have experience of Downing Street and of governing, because he is conscious that that's a blind spot. But watch the space in terms of how some of those defectors get treated, because all MPs and former MPs have egos, and if you don't massage them correctly, and if you make them feel deeply unused and unloved, then they might end up turning on you. Yeah,
they don't want to feel as if they're being left in the left luggage department. Anna Mihailova, great to talk to you. We're going to talk again, aren't we, after 6 o'clock on Pienaar and Friends. Now, coming up, a huge piece of legislation, a defence bill, has gone through Congress, or the House of Representatives in the United States. We're going to be looking at what that means, because it touches on questions of Europe and Ukraine and other really quite sensitive stuff for us on this side of the Atlantic as well. And we're going to get an update on the polls, talking to Luke Trill from More in Common, and why the home of Santa Claus is full of soldiers. It's now 5:20. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Now, the United States House of Representatives has passed a major defence bill in Washington. It boosts spending on defence by some $8 billion more than President Trump requested, but it does contain what look like a number of rebukes to President Trump over foreign policy from his critics. We can welcome Major General William Enyart, who was the 37th Adjutant General of the state of Illinois and a former Democrat representative on Capitol Hill for Illinois' 12th Congressional District. General, welcome to you.
Well, thank you, and it's great to be with you this afternoon.
You're very welcome, General. Tell us, is there more commitment and support for NATO then in Europe, in Congress, than there seems to be in the White House?
Well, I think that's certainly true. I think the very higher echelons of the military understand the importance of NATO and certainly support our allies and understand the importance of alliances in this dangerous world. Had it not been for our NATO allies who supported us for the 20 years of Iraq and Afghanistan, it would have required a much, much larger commitment of U.S. forces. And frankly, I'm not sure we could have handled that. And certainly I think the same is true in Congress, particularly the Senate, where people tend to have a more strategic view, and frankly, the people he surrounded himself with in the White House tend to, better word, isolationist.
I mean, Gabriel, you'll know very well. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of commentary here and around Europe about the Trump administration seemingly stepping back from the Atlantic Alliance. And now, with this legislation, Congress has passed a big piece of legislation. Among other things, it demands the level of US forces in Europe should not fall below 76,000 for more than 45 days. I mean, how far does this legislation and provisions like that tie the hands of the president and the Pentagon?
Well, it's certainly not tied his hands in his first administration or thus far in the current administration. He has moved money around and refused to spend money and has cut money that Congress has appropriated. The question is, how much longer will Congress allow and the courts allow him to do that? The Constitution clearly sets forth that Congress has the power of the purse, yet Donald Trump and his administration have, in many ways, certainly ignored that.
Yeah. So when you get this piece of legislation setting a minimum level for the deployment of US troops in Europe, is he then able, within the Constitution and within the law, to ignore that?
Well, I would certainly argue that he is not. However, he has certainly done that and has moved money around in the Pentagon and had the Pentagon move money around. For example, when he moved money out of building housing for soldiers and their families and put it into building a wall along the Rio Grande, the border between Mexico and the southern border between Mexico and the United States, that certainly was not anything that Congress had intended or appropriated money for.
All right, General, really good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on. General William Pienaar there. Now, Lapland. We, of course, know that that's where Santa Claus lives, isn't it? But as well as hoping, if you're a child, maybe with your mum and dad, to go and visit his grotto, even have a ride on the sleigh, the Finnish city of Rovaniemi has also been welcoming a very different kind of Christmas visitor. Thousands of NATO troops have been passing through that area. It's only 50 miles from the Russian border. They've been on their way to Europe's largest military exercise. You can hear there, if you're there, military aircraft, not the bells of sleighs flying overhead, and we've got a serious matter of military exercises going on here at a rather tense time. Heikki Aalto is the MP for Lapland, chair of Finland's Defence Committee too. Hello to you, Heikki.
Hello, good to be with you.
And good to have you here. Quite a privilege to have Santa Claus as one of your constituents.
Well, definitely. He is the most famous citizen in Rovaniemi and a great ambassador for the whole country and nation of Finland.
Which, and this time of year, it's a place that so many families go to with an enormous amount of pleasure. But of course, there's a shadow over life in Lapland and over so much of Europe, isn't there? With the growing threat, the growing presence of Vladimir Putin's Russia, and your country, Finland, which knows a lot about that tension over the years, over recent history, seems determined to try to be ready for it.
Well, yes, of course, the Russian aggression is a great threat for peace on our continent, and it threatens the world peace also. That's why we need to continue supporting Ukraine for them to beat the Russians, because that's the only way to end the aggression. But in Finland, we think that when you are well prepared, you don't have to be afraid. And I believe this preparedness in Finland makes it possible that although we have the big eastern bear in our neighbor, we are still, what comes to the United States, the happiest nation in the world, 8th consecutive.
Congratulations on that happy spirit, especially at this time of year. But when you look at the threat posed by Russia just across the border, is that threat now becoming more obvious? We talk a lot about, we call it hybrid warfare, we talk about grey warfare, various aggressive acts short of outright aggression, testing the resolve of the West and of NATO countries. How is that apparent to you there in Lapland?
Well, Finland is really well prepared. And of course, in Rovaniemi, we can feel ourselves very secure as a main military base at the same time as we are maybe the most touristic winter destination for the people to come and visit Santa and enjoy the tons and tons of pure white snow we have on the ground and see the aurora borealis on the sky and so on. So yes, we are prepared. And in Finland, we kind of have this saying that if there ever would be a time that the Russians would try to somehow threaten us, it would be the Christmas day, because then we are celebrating Christmas and having holidays with our families. And last Christmas, Russian Shadow Fleet vessel called Eagle S actually cut some electrical cables between Finland and Estonia. And it wasn't a great threat against Finland as a greater nation, but it was a great threat against our neighbors in Estonia. So we have to understand that this Russian aggression takes different fronts and different forms all around Europe, not only within the eastern flank.
Yeah, and we're familiar, aren't we, with the concept of grey warfare now, hybrid warfare in so many forms. I must ask you one final, very, very serious question, if I may, maybe a sensitive one for a representative of Lapland, the home of Santa Claus himself, because we know, don't we, that the North Pole moves depending on the movements of the Earth. Can you say with absolute certainty and accuracy that Santa's home is still in Rovaniemi?
Definitely. Santa's home is in Lapland and in Rovaniemi, and you can come and see for yourself. There is great daily flight connections between the British Isles and Rovaniemi, so you can come and see for yourself and get some of the Christmas spirit to take back home.
Okay, Heikki Aalto, MP for that, then I might just do that. Thank you so much.
You're most
coming up after 6, Pienaar and Friends. Anna Mihailova is going to be back with us, of course, and so is Adam Bolton, my Times Radio colleague. And we are going to be heading into our polling station and looking at the latest in the opinion polls with Luke Trill from More in Common. Now, though, 5:30, time for the news with Tom Noonan.
across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Opposition leader and the winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize says that Donald Trump's actions against President Maduro are decisive. Now, Maria Corina Machado is in Oslo collecting her award. Meanwhile, the tensions reach a new pitch. American troops have seized a tanker off the Venezuelan coast. And we can talk to Vera Bergengruen, the national security reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Hi to you, Vera.
Hi.
Hi. I mean, what are your own thoughts on this, first of all? Maria Corina Machado, clearly an admirable and a brave woman, standing up to a brutal leader of Venezuela in the form of Maduro. Do you also feel, Vera, that the award of the Nobel Prize to Maria Corina Machado was a kind of subtle rebuke to Donald Trump, given his so aggressive approach to foreign policy in Venezuela?
I don't think. I mean, Maria Corina Machado dedicated her prize to Donald Trump and has thanked him and has encouraged. She has encouraged Trump's very aggressive posture and even his threats of military action against the regime. So, obviously everybody knew that the president was really hoping in his own way to get the Nobel Peace Prize, even though it was pretty much impossible this year. So I don't think it was necessarily a rebuke.
Well, on the part of the Nobel Committee, not on the part of Maria Corina Machado, who supports the president and what he's doing. I mean, she clearly sees Trump as a route to change in her country and possibly the end of the Maduro regime. And she argues, doesn't she, that he is doing that in a way that no other leader has.
That's right. I mean, I think the Venezuelan opposition, I think, is trying to get help in any corner they can. And they do, all of their allies in the United States, for the vast majority, on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, think that her party won the election last year and that Maduro is an illegitimate president. But the Republicans are the ones who have been really encouraging potential regime change by force and military action against Maduro. So I think she's allied herself with a lot of them. We just saw a lot of them in Oslo for her ceremony. We saw a lot of U.S. lawmakers, a lot of conservative Latin American presidents. And so I do think that it is, that push for military action is coming more from their end.
Yeah. And well, I mean, Maria Corina Machado is also pretty close to Marco Rubio, isn't she? The Secretary of State of the U.S. administration.
That's right. I mean, Marco Rubio has for a very long time advocated, pretty hardline policies when it comes to the Western Hemisphere. And for him, he's the son of Cuban immigrants. For him, Cuba and Venezuela are two sides of the same coin. And if, this regime in Venezuela can be overthrown, this authoritarian regime, he is hoping that the same will happen in Cuba.
The winner of the Nobel Prize will clearly be then supporting the Trump administration's approach for her reasons, in support of her country. She wants it to become a democracy again. President Trump will be taking the position he's taking towards Venezuela for his reasons. And tell me, you don't really have to be a total cynic, do you, to believe that the administration in Washington is also interested in Venezuela's oil reserves?
I mean, Trump has said that publicly in his own way. I mean, he said it about every country in the world, not just Venezuela. He said it about, he's been striking in his second term quite a few deals for rare earths and minerals. He did this with Ukraine. He's done this with other countries. So this is a president who very much sees the world through a transactional, deal-based lens when it comes to natural resources. And, another important thing to remember is that he actually has been allowing Chevron, a U.S. oil company, to continue extracting oil in Venezuela, even though a lot of that money, goes to the Maduro regime. So I think, he's kind of willing to be more practical when it comes to that, when it comes to the deal side of things.
How might that play out then, if and when it hasn't happened yet, we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but if America does move on Venezuela, does bring about regime change, and then does have, a significant say in the way the Venezuelan oil reserves are treated, how would that play out in relation to the administration and American multinational oil interests?
I mean, again, this administration has been quite clear that would be a good outcome, not just for the U.S., but for the world as a whole. Being able to go in there, stabilize the country. Basically, they think that this country, which has the largest oil reserves in the entire world, is being underused. That they can go in and really do something that is good for them and also good for Venezuela as a country that has just slowly fallen into decline for such a long time. So I think it remains to be seen, but that is a really big part of it. And we also know that the Venezuelan opposition has been going around for a long time, making this one of their key arguments, given who's in office in the United States. They have been going to oil conferences, and here in Washington, they've been discussing this. And they've been telling people, listen, it is in your interest to put pressure on Maduro, because as soon as he's gone, there's going to be this, wealth of resources that we're going to invite the whole world to come in and extract. That is
such interesting context. Vera Bergengruen at the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much. The Sunday Times Sportswoman of the Year Awards have been celebrating the best of women's sport for 38 years, from the grassroots inspirations to those at the top of the game, winning Olympic gold medals. This year, the shortlist has just been revealed. So if you want to find out more about the candidates and cast your votes, you can visit thetimes.com Sportswoman of the Year. Now, here to Bristol, where more than 600 artefacts were stolen from Bristol Museum's British Empire and Commonwealth collection on the 25th of September. Police have now released the images of the 4 men believed to have been involved in the early morning raid. And we can talk to Will Humphreys, Southwest and Countryside correspondent for The Times. Hi to you, Will.
Hi there, John.
Welcome. Do tell us more about this raid.
Yes, we've only just been told about this today, but like you said, it happened back in September. One of the reasons why we're only hearing about it now is apparently it's taken many weeks to sort through the ransacked contents of this museum archive to actually work out what was stolen. We've been told today by the Bristol City Council that these 4 men, who are the prime suspects, entered the archive, which is in an undisclosed warehouse in the city, and didn't seem to have a plan. They looked like they were just ransacking the archives, pulling things off the shelves and stuffing them into bags. And they left a scene of real destruction in the archives, which has taken weeks for the archivists to sort of sort through and work out what has been taken.
And what do we know about the value of the items that were taken, Will?
So this collection is mainly of things from the early 19th century, of people who lived in the British Empire and brought back artifacts, photographs, papers. So individually, each item is not worth a huge amount, but the archivists say that the cultural value of this collection as a whole is very high. It's sort of globally important as a snapshot of the late sort of British Empire.
So irreplaceable in that sense. And getting into the supposedly but not hidden warehouse and getting hold of this stuff, was that a complicated operation for the burglars? Was it easily done?
We haven't been sort of given any details of how they entered or exited this warehouse. I've been down to the location that we are not disclosing because the police and council don't want it to be known where it is, and the insurers don't either. But it's on a fairly sort of well-worn cycle and footpath in the city. Lots of people walk past this place, perhaps not knowing that this sort of wealth of artifacts are stored there. But it's not somewhere that many people would enter and exit. So if anyone had seen that, the police are hoping that people would, it would jog their memory that was unusual to be entering and exiting this building.
All right. Good to talk to you. Thank you, Will. That's Will Humphreys there, Southwestern Countryside correspondent for The Times. Now, this week, Nick Clegg joins Hugo Rifkin for a special episode of How to Win an Election. You can hear the former Deputy Prime Minister talk about what went on inside the 2010 election campaign, including the first ever British TV debates, Cleggmania, do you remember that? And his decision to join the coalition government. And here he is, defending his decision to break his promise and increase tuition fees.
Yeah, I felt absolutely wretched. All this effort, all this hope, and it's dissipated. Not only are we're coming back with fewer MPs than the previous part. So, and this, I think, it meant that I went on that train down to London to all the subsequent drama of the subsequent days of forming the coalition, when the helicopters were hovering over the train and so on. In my head, I was in a weak position. Actually, the maths indicated one choice. Either you go in government with the Conservatives, or there is no government and there's another election. Mm-hmm. That was the only choice. Once when I was on my own with Gordon and he was going, oh, we can do this, and he kept writing all these numbers. I remember literally putting my hand on his sort of wrist and saying, Gordon, it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't work. Once we were thrown into this and everyone was getting wildly excited, of course we Of course, I mean, I was then a negotiator. And then, of course, the first thing you do when you're a negotiator, done it all my life, both in and out of politics, is you find leverage.
And that's Nick Clegg. You can hear more from him in How to Win an Election, and you can hear it wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up after 6, Pienaar and Friends. And joining me this week, my Times Radio colleague Adam Bolton and our political editor Anna Mikhailova. First, though, coming up on Times Radio, we'll have Luke Trill with more in common. This is John Pienaar on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Today, it is your chance to speak to your favourite Times journalists. Lines are open for this year's Christmas Appeal phone-in. Now, the Times and the Sunday Times are raising money for 3 charities. There's Switchback, which provides mentoring to young men leaving prison, Kissing It Better, which brings younger and older people together to fight loneliness, and World Bicycle Relief, which gives bicycles to people around the world to help them access education, healthcare and jobs. And just a reminder, if you want to donate, you can call 0207 782 5555. That's 0207 782 5555. Or you can visit thetimes.com/Christmas Appeal. Now, lines are open until 6 this evening, so you've got, 15 minutes to go. And Adam Bolton is going to be here for Pienaar and Friends. He's just been doing his turn on the phones. You've still got a chance to have a word with Adam. Recommend that warmly at any given moment. Now, how can you be a health fiend and a chocoholic? Apparently it's possible. Scientists say that a compound found in dark chocolate might actually slow down biological aging. Now, before you just reach for another bar, experts say it's not a license to eat as much chocolate as you absolutely like, but it could point to everyday foods that help us stay younger for longer. Let's get a bit more on that. Spencer Hyman is the co-founder and the head of chocolate at Cocoa Runners. Hello to you, Spencer.
Hello.
Spencer, I think we got you now after a slightly dodgy connection. Can you hear me nice and clear?
I can hear you very nicely and very clearly. And I'm sorry about the...
No, not your fault. This happens. It simply happens. Have a bite of chocolate and cheer yourself up. Spencer Hyman, tell me then about dark chocolate and how it can make us stay younger. Well, too late in some of our cases, but it still seems, you say, to offer that promise.
It definitely does. So the secret here is that dark chocolate is one of the great treats that you can have. And now, as you know, there's this great research which has come out of King's College London. But what it really is talking about is that you should savour better dark chocolate and share it with your friends and use it as a means just to appreciate the delights of flavour and all the wonderful benefits that chocolate has in it, as the survey shows with stuff like theobromine and all the other wonderful polyphenols.
Okay, but that's a
so chocolate's just wonderful for sharing.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good case for, a nice slice or piece of chocolate. But what about the staying younger bit?
So I think the argument there is there's multiple aspects to it. So if you sort of think about nutrition and what you sort of want to do, there's sort of all these wonderful things like sort of, the macronutrients, the carbs, the proteins, the fats, and everything. We all sort of, get that. It's a bit like, knowing whether or not in your car you've got petrol or diesel and everything. And then we all sort of know about vitamins and micronutrients and minerals. But what people are getting very excited now about, and what may be encouraging us to live longer, are these wonderful things called phytonutrients, which were originally thought to be a vitamin, called vitamin P or vitamin permeable. And these are what sort of keeps your gut healthy, which is the reason why this twin study is so relevant. But also, basically, you stay young because you can chat to your friends, and you can stay young by engaging your brain. And chocolate is brilliant to discuss. And on top of that, it's got all these wonderful benefits like polyphenols and all those phytonutrients. And you get that through the flavor. So there's this sort of wonderful virtuous circle that when you taste a great bit of chocolate, it takes you on a journey of flavor discovery. It's not just a sort of sugar rush, which you just scoff down. And too much sugar is just not a good idea for you. Okay. So the idea of great dark craft chocolate, which is full of all sorts of, wonderful substances and flavonols and all the other stuff, is just great for you. Okay. And also, anything which encourages you, I think, to chat to people as you get older is really important. And most of us, when we eat foods, unfortunately, we scoff them, and we scoff them on our own, which is just a real shame. And that's definitely how chocolate gets consumed. So with the greatest of respect, if you probably think the last time you had a chocolate snack, it'll probably be something which you rushed, and you probably won't have shared it with your friends and partners and everything. Whereas a great craft dark chocolate is something that you can, open up a discussion with, be packed full of all sorts of great, wonderful things for you. And on top of that, it's going to be an experience that you can remember this Christmas.
Okay, look, I mean, I'm all believing in favour of people having a good time. Nothing, no one more than me where that's gone. But aren't you telling me now that have a bit of chocolate and it'll make you happy, because chocolate's lovely. Share it with some friends; they'll enjoy it too. You're with your friends, you'll have a nice chat. Everyone will be happy, and if you're happier, you might just live longer. Is this just a nice way of saying eat chocolate because you'll all enjoy it and live longer, or you'll want to live longer, so you can eat more chocolate? It's a wonderful ad for chocolate. Am I being cynical?
I don't think you're being cynical. I think that's part of the answer. So I think part of the answer is, one of the ways to stave off aging is by keeping yourself mentally sharp. But there's another whole bunch of things, which is there are a bunch of foods which are just good and keep you healthy. And this is where all the interesting research now is at the moment. So we've known for a long time that, for example, if you don't have enough vitamin C, you get scurvy. If you don't have enough carbs or fats or minerals, you again have problems. What people have been less clear about are these wonderful things called phytonutrients, which are all the things which give rise to flavors in everything from tea to chocolate to coffee to your carrots to strawberries and everything else like that. And the more of those you've got, the healthier your gut is. And that seems to actually impact other aspects of your body too. But what isn't yet brilliantly clear is quite the one-to-one relationship you've got there. And so what this study, and what I think in general people are discovering, is that there are lots of foods, virgin olive oil is another one, dark chocolate's another one, which actually do seem to have some benefits for health, which we can't sort of quite tease out in the same way that you can sort of say, if you don't have vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. If you don't have vitamin D, you're going to get rickets, all that sort of stuff. And I think that's where this is sort of quite interesting. Okay. And on top of that, you've got all the psychological benefits. So I think there is a little bit more to it than just sort of saying it's a great opportunity to, relax with some friends.
Yeah.
It's got a bit more than that too. I think there is some science behind it, but I think it's difficult to tease out. Okay. And one of the reasons why candidly it's difficult to tease out is there's so much difference in quality between great craft chocolate, the stuff where you know where the beans come from, how it's been crafted, and candidly most supermarket dark chocolate too, which will have been roasted so that lots of the benefits there, like the polyphenols, will have been sort of roasted away.
Okay, Spencer. Goodness me, I don't want to be a killjoy. You'll forgive me if I still sound a little bit sceptical about the actual connection between eating chocolate and living longer. But hey, you made a perfectly nice case for sitting down and having a good time while eating something nice. And I don't want to pour too much cold water on that, especially as we get closer to the Christmas season. Spencer Hyman at Cocoa Runners. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Kate has written in, John, I absolutely love your show. Thank you, Kate, but I'm feeling a little weary. Please keep up the information about staying young, eating dark chocolate, and not too much more on the potential for war with Russia. Kate, I quite see where you're coming from. Forgive me if I just keep on doing a little bit of both from time to time. Time now is 5:53.
The Polling Station with Luke Trill on Times Radio.
And here is Luke. Hello to you, Luke.
Good evening.
It's great to have you here from your berth at More in Common with the latest polling numbers, Luke. Where should we start? You tell us where you want to start. You've got some number on where Labour is. Usually, as usual, it's not an especially happy place.
No, it's not good news for Labour. We find that this week they have dropped into third place in our polling. They're on 20%, behind the Conservatives on 21%, and behind Reform UK on 30%. And if you zoom out and look across the polling, it does now look in the polling averages as though the Conservatives have just narrowly started to overtake Labour as the second largest party in terms of support.
Right. This is, of course, interesting. So Kemi Badenoch seems to be a bit more popular than she was quite recently. And I think you're suggesting here that maybe this trend is sustained and sustainable. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that Kemi Badenoch has been struggling to cut through to the public, to capture people's attention. And what seems to be happening is, particularly since her conference speech and her budget speech, she has had a big bump in her personal approval. So her personal approval rating now sits at -14. Now, that might not sound particularly impressive,
yes,
but Keir Starmer's is at -48. So she's way higher than him. And importantly, she's now within touching distance of Ed Davey and Nigel Farage, who are on -11 and -12 respectively. So it's basically a three-way tie for the least disapproved of party leader. And that is a big improvement for Kemi Badenoch, who, as we say, in our focus groups up till now, we've been finding she's kind of struggled to cut through, way that Farage commands the media agenda, Keir Starmer's Prime Minister. It does seem more people now willing to give her a hearing.
Yeah, I mean that's more than encouraging, considering, she was easily, just pretty much without credibility. She was commonly being discussed as a leader walking the plank and about to exit the leader's berth at the Tory party. Now seems to be a bit of a different story. Now, I'm not sure Robert Jenrick, for example, he'd be most happy about that.
No, I think, people in his camp were expecting that a move would be made against Kemi Badenoch perhaps next year after those local and Scottish and Welsh elections. It may now be the case that she has done enough to at least stem some of those losses. But of course, it's a long way away. And the thing about momentum, and particularly when it comes to public opinion, is it's not enough just to get it. You've got to keep it. So she'll have to keep cutting through between now and those elections to avoid the calamity which lots of people foresaw earlier this year.
Right. Now, let's just switch the focus to the subject we've been talking about, as we generally do on this show quite a lot, which is the war in Ukraine. There's very little for Ukraine to be happy about, but there is some grounds for a certain kind of comfort in the figures that you have, Luke, on the way that Ukraine's friends are supporting that country in its war against Russia.
Yes, so we conducted a 5-country poll across Britain, France, Germany, Poland and the US, and we particularly were looking at that proposed Witkoff deal, which would have required big concessions on the part of Ukraine. What we found was the public across these countries reject some of the key terms of that proposed deal. So majorities of Britons, the French, Americans and Poles believe it would be unacceptable for Ukraine to give up territory currently occupied by Russia, to reduce the size of its armed forces, or to be barred from joining NATO or NATO stationing troops in Ukraine. And what's also interesting is that support for Ukraine is continues to be particularly strong in Britain, along with Poland. So Brits and Poles the most likely to say that Witkoff deal, the original 28-point plan, wasn't acceptable.
And that's worth dwelling on for a moment, isn't it? Because Britain's support for Ukraine has been steady, it has been steadfast. The Ukrainians certainly seem to see that way. That's been tested in Ukraine, and that is the case. You've got squares and so on in Kyiv, named after the past British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was, whatever you think of Boris Johnson, he was a strong supporter of Ukraine. Poland, of course, that's a country on the very border of Russia, facing a constant threat. In Britain's case, it's a different proposition. It's more of an emotional tie, and a strong one.
Absolutely. And interestingly, the UK's role in the conflict is a source of pride for many Britons, we found. We know that, there's lots that Brits aren't proud of at the moment, but actually 62% of Brits think that the UK has helped working towards peace in Ukraine. 30% say it's made them more proud to be British. And very few want to put a strict time limit on our support for Ukraine. And what I guess is even more interesting is when we look at the other countries we polled, there are sometimes big splits between supporters of different parties, particularly in Germany. AfD supporters much less likely to support Ukraine. You don't see that polarisation either here. So it's strong overall support, but actually even Reform UK supporters, who are sometimes seen to be a little bit more sceptical of Ukraine, Nigel Farage, perhaps more sceptical than other party leaders, actually more supportive of Ukraine than the average voter in the other countries we looked at. So there is clearly something quite unique about Brits' support for Ukraine. It's both strong and non-polarised.
So interesting, aren't they, those numbers? Luke, I have to leave it there for now, but we'll do it again same time next week with a new set of numbers to share with our listeners. Pienaar and Friends is coming up on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm John Pienaar. Welcome to Pienaar and Friends. Tonight, that is my Times Radio colleague Adam Bolton and our political editor Anna Mihailova. And you too, do join in the conversation. Send me a text, send me a tweet and join in, and we'll chat after the news with Tom Noonan.
Thank you, John. Good evening. Volodymyr Zelensky has put forward a new peace plan to the United States, saying Ukrainians must vote in a referendum on territorial concessions. He says American officials have suggested turning the east of Ukraine, the Donbass, into a free economic zone with his troops withdrawing. In his peace proposals, he wants Russia to withdraw from other regions bordering the Donbass and says there needs to be security guarantees for his country. The NATO Secretary-General is warning Europe it must do more on defence if it's going to prevent another world war. Mark Rutte says allies need to
across the UK on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, online and on your smart speaker. Quality journalism, analysis and opinion that speaks for itself. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
It's good to have you with us on Pienaar and Friends, and our good conversation in very good company tonight. That's Adam Bolton, my Times Radio colleague. Hello to you, Adam.
Hello.
Welcome back, as always. And Anna Miholova, who I saw just moments ago. Can't see you too often, Anna. It's lovely to see you here. What's your thought for the day, Anna?
My thought for the day is it concerns the pubs that are banning Labour MPs. So I've been very intrigued by this story. You had a couple of pubs start out and they say we're banning our local MP because we're unhappy with the budget and we're unhappy with the tax situation, and Rachel Reeves didn't listen to us and didn't give us the right incentives. In fact, she's increasing our taxes effectively. And now we've got a spate of pubs joining a campaign, and people are printing stickers saying no Labour MPs to put on their pub windows. And it's quite funny because some of the people who produce these stickers, they say they've had queries from all over the place. So a gentleman called Andy Lennox says, we're getting requests from across the UK for stickers and advice on how to get involved from bosses as far away as Clacton-on-Sea. Now, I don't know if Mr. Lennox is being intentionally humorous here, but obviously there's a reason why he's probably getting requests from Clacton-on-Sea. We know what Clacton is, which famous gentleman Clacton's now linked to, but isn't it unimaginable? I know we talk about politics being bizarre these days and the rule book being effectively out the window, but the idea that only a year on, or a year and a bit on, after a big stonking majority and a change of government after 14 years of one party, you have a party this unpopular. I mean, this sounds like the sort of thing you get, at the end of a long period in power, not the beginning.
Well, I mean, the unpopularity at this stage is really remarkable. It also sounds a little bit like a pub hitting on a really good idea to get some attention for the problems facing pubs, which is part of the art of getting your message across. It's part of that. I had a very nice chap on a moment ago who was persuading us all that eating dark chocolate was a great way to stay young forever. I think he was basically saying eating chocolate is a good idea. He's from a chocolate company.
I personally don't. I'm not going to argue with that at all. I think that makes me feel good about my life choices.
I've got to say, I really hate this. I think this is, cancel culture gone mad. I mean, the job of pubs is to serve people and to serve their local communities, and banning your local MP, even if you disagree with him, strikes me as really the wrong sort of gesture. I think, we've talked about boycotts before on Pienaar and Friends, and I just think that's everybody playing into kind of Twitter online culture. I hate you, so I'm going to ban you from this and ban you from that, and I just think it's awful. I mean, I
wonder how true it is on the ground. Do you think if there's a pub in a constituency and the local MP is known there and drinks and goes to that pub and has the ploughman's lunch or whatever, would the landlord suddenly decide to ban him in a fit of rage because it's fashionable?
I personally think it all depends on the MP, because I suspect that those kind of MPs would not get banned. The MPs who do go and spend actual time regularly, but a lot of MPs are, well, understandably a little bit busy, or they spend their time more in Westminster. But I agree with Adam. I think, as one of the affected Labour MPs has said in response, this means he can't engage with people as much, including with that very business and those businesses they're trying to help.
Yeah. Adam, what is your thought for today?
Well, my thought for today was going to be about the Times appeal, because I've just been on the phones and we had some very generous people calling in, readers. It was nice to talk to them and just to say that the appeal, our day, you were on the phones, I know earlier on, our day on the phones is over, but you can still contribute. So please do to those three very good causes. But breaking news, as we like to say in the last few minutes, is about Nigel Farage, and this is Dulwich College, the school which he attended to, has, I have to say rather belatedly, made its first comments on the reported racist and anti-Semitic behaviour of Farage when he was a pupil. They've written to one of those people who was saying that he had been offended as a pupil by his fellow pupil Farage's comments and behaviour. Dulwich College says that they find the reports of racist and anti-Semitic comments by Nigel Farage, quotes, profoundly distressing and entirely at odds with the Dulwich College of today, and they say such behaviour is wholly incompatible with the values which the college holds. I have to say, I don't know who's running the PR for Dulwich College, but I think they could have been a damn sight quicker getting that out.
Yeah. It's had the effect of keeping the story going, with a fresh lease of life, which is, again, the last thing that Nigel Farage wanted. I'm not sure there's been polling evidence that this story, which has got a lot of people's attention, has been running now for feels like weeks, is having a material effect on the Reform Party. There is there any evidence of that we know of?
Well, what's interesting about that is, on the face of it, a lot of members of Reform come out and they say this is an establishment stitch-up. A lot of this is coming, obviously, from The Guardian in terms of the reporting, and in some ways there's going to be a lot of people who will look at that and take that view, absolutely. Where I will be looking, and it hasn't been affected yet, but where I want to see and determine whether or not this is having an effect is in donation figures. So recently there has been a very successful round of donations reported. So Reform has for a while couldn't quite muster the amount of donations as the Tories were getting. The Tories were still beating them, and the last set of published figures actually showed quite a lot of really significant donors coming over and pledging very big sums of money, in some cases record sums of money. But all of that refers to before this story came out, and just very anecdotally I have heard that some donors or potential donors have been concerned about this, and that it could actually put some people off who are planning to give money. So I think it's every quarterly. This is a quarterly release, but it will be very interesting to see if the next set of donations is not as high.
That's interesting one to follow. I want to go back for a moment before we move on, Anna, to the story that you brought us about an hour ago. The interview given by Wes Streeting, pretty long interview to the New Statesman. Now, the New Statesman has got a pretty long tradition, and they've certainly refreshed it in recent weeks, of giving interviews to significant Labour Party figures who are generally thought to have some sort of ambition of maybe one day being leader of the party, and them using that interview. I'm thinking of Andy Burnham most recently, and now Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, to, as it were, to use the cliche, setting out their stalls. And this is what Wes Streeting has done in a pretty expansive way. Anna, for those who didn't hear what we had learned about this earlier on, just take us through it.
So Wes Streeting's given an interview to the New Statesman, and he criticises the government's technocratic approach, as he put it. So those are his words, and he even says that Labour's in danger of being seen as a maintenance department for the country as opposed to a government, and that the effect of that could be to push voters to looking for another maintenance department if they do not feel engaged enough with the government, or they do not feel an attachment to it. Then of course they can shop around. I mean, that's his argument. And of course there's a world in which you can say, Wes Streeting is a very, very good performer. He does not stray off what he wants to say. He's not a politician who will accidentally say something in an interview. So usually if he says something interesting and headline grabbing, he has planned it. So the timing is just very curious of this. This is not the Andy Burnham interview in the New Statesman, just to be clear, although there are obviously comparisons that we can draw as commentators, but there are no gaffes in this. There's nothing that is so explicit that it could hurt him or count against him. But it is just very interesting for him to be basically directly criticising the government's approach and saying he's frustrated, even though he is a senior member of that government. And it is setting out his stall in some senses, but in a way that he could easily say, well, hold on, I'm just giving a view in terms of where that direction should be as a key player.
But of course it would. But of course
it has great resonance for the simple reason: if you're running a maintenance department, that means that you are by definition a caretaker. And what was the charge which was levelled against the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions this week by Kemi Badenoch? You're just a caretaker. And I think the real relevance of the William Hague in the Times this week in his column was making exactly that point, saying it wasn't a question of Tory-style letters going in, that there could just come a point where, as he's put it, the Labour Party horse just collapses under Keir Starmer, and whatever Keir Starmer says about wanting to fight, it's not relevant because people don't see him as a leader. And inevitably, these sort of comments from Wes Streeting are going to become part of that narrative. And as we know, Wes Streeting is widely talked of as someone who, if Keir Starmer wasn't there, would see himself as a leadership candidate. And of course, he's also in the crosshairs at the moment because he's trying to pull off an end to the doctors' strike. So, whatever one thinks about Wes Streeting, this doesn't, as I say, as we've just heard, I mean, it is not an Andy Burnham challenge, but at the same time, it is a significant piece of positioning, which I don't think makes things any easier for the Prime Minister.
Just the phrase maintenance department. I mean, how do you see that as other than a crafted swipe? Not just at the direction of the party, although that in itself is enough. I mean, who is dictating the direction of the party? It is the leader of the party. But the image of the maintenance machine, you can always see the Prime Minister in a brown coat, just tinkering with things as things keep on turning over, and nothing is happening, nothing is changing. And if that's the case, on the path that Labour's on at the moment, they're heading for doom, which is also pretty much explicit in the interview.
It's just very reminiscent of the very damning criticism that was made in private by it was sourced to people within Keir Starmer's team, that the Prime Minister was like a driverless train without a train driver. So it just has that similar essence, and it certainly does not help. The government will not be welcomed, I think. But there's not much. Also, when a Prime Minister is so far below in the polls, when the government is low in the polls and is trying to get things through, but really has had so many difficulties in passing legislation. We've just seen the latest blow in the Lords to some of its flagship legislation. It comes to a point where people like Wes Streeting do feel empowered to speak out a bit more, because what else? What can they do? Frankly, what are they going to sack Wes Streeting? No. Okay. Well, I'm going to stay in a moment in the general neighbourhood of Wes Streeting and talk about the doctors' strike coming up, and what do you make of the way that's being handled? Yes, by Wes Streeting. He's dealing with the BMA in an ever more forthright and an aggressive way, and the BMA, who are getting more and more belligerent and militant. What are your thoughts on that? What it means for that relationship and for the health services? That relationship carries on deteriorating in the way that it is. Let me just say, if you want a sneak preview of tomorrow's Times front page, you can tune into Times Radio at 10, and there it is. If every night just after 10 we bring you the front page before it's published, so do tune in to Carol Walker Monday to Wednesday, Henry Bonsu's on Thursday and Friday, and Darryl Morris on Sunday night. They will bring you tomorrow's news today. More coming up from Anna and Adam and me on Pienaar and Friends here on Times Radio.
across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
And here with me on Pienaar and Friends, Adam Bolton and Anna Mihailova. And we may well be heading then for a strike over Christmas. And I was saying earlier on, I'm not at all sure why that needed to be. The Health Secretary made his new offer just yesterday. The BMA was saying just this morning on Times Radio, they thought, well, it was enough to have passed the threshold of putting to the members, and now they're going to be consulting the members. Not a full-blown ballot, but just a survey, whatever that might mean in terms of gauging the opinion of the BMA membership. And then on the basis of that, they'll decide whether or not to have a full-blown ballot. But West Reading, he's said to be furious. And Adam and Anna, he's got a point, hasn't he? We didn't have to have this strike over Christmas. They could survey, as they say, the ministers, and then keep open their members, and then keep open the option of strike action later if the idea is dismissed.
Yes, indeed. And we've also got the Prime Minister chiming in today saying that it's irresponsible for the doctors to go on strike because of the flu crisis. I think it is pretty clear that the government believes that public opinion is strongly against these strikes, and they're trying to mobilise it. But what is extraordinary is that the leadership of the junior doctors and the BMA does seem incredibly politicised and incredibly locked into confrontation with the government. And, I listened to their representative being interviewed this morning by Kate McCann on Breakfast, and it really did sound to me like a whiny teenager that, anything that was put as terms of we're trying to meet you or whatever was rejected, and another point was raised. And, the issue here is that they have secured what they regard as a mandate through the vote of their membership. But I think there has to be a real question that perhaps they should think quite hard as to whether, given the public debate, their members, i.e. the junior doctors, are actually going to go out on strike in significant numbers over the next few days. And if that does happen, it will effectively mean that the BMA leadership is not speaking for the rank and file of the doctors.
Yeah, and you're nodding, Anna.
Well, that's precisely what happened in the last strike. You did have more doctors ignore it and come out and work than expected, which meant that services, the good news from that was services kept running at an okay level, so there was no collapse. And it just, there are two things. I mean, the unions have to be pretty careful because they risk losing the support of their own members, because you have also had doctors quitting and saying they don't agree. And the second thing is they risk just being a less effective force. So a threat of strike, if services can kind of muddle along and continue at a reasonable level, then they become less powerful in their own negotiating. Yes. But I think, the reason people are so rightly agitated about this is because it comes at the same time as this super flu and genuine concerns about how hospitals are going to cope, how they're already coping, and whether or not that's going to lead to lots of serious cases and even extra fatalities. Yes. So public opinion when surveyed on this have already for a while not really been on side on this question with the BMA and with the doctors on this specifically. And I think the timing here is just going to push people more that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to remember that what West Streeting has done is come up with an offer on training places which does address one of the genuine structural problems which people making their way up in British people making their way up in the medical profession face today, that they basically not enough training places for them to specialise, and foreigners come in taking places there are. He's addressed that, but what he hasn't addressed is more money or more pay.
Yes.
Bearing in mind that not only was there the 22% award last year, but this year there was a further 5%. Now, I don't know about you, but there are a lot of people in this country who have not got anything like 5% pay awards. And that, again, I think, the doctors do have to think long and carefully about, whether they are in such a unprivileged position that they want to behave like, a manual union of times gone by.
Well, and particularly since the BMA's central argument on pay is that they want to restore it to, how it was years gone by if it had gone up with inflation. But most of those doctors, junior doctors, were not around anywhere near their jobs at that time. So it's not like they are people who have not seen any pay rise themselves. They've entered the profession, in recent years and have seen those pay rises. So a lot of people who, especially those who have been in jobs where there has been basically no pay rise for a long time, have very little sympathy with that.
And you have to believe that the health secretary, for him, it would be, to all intents and purposes, quite impossible to increase the headline pay rates. And given that all that's been said, given that they're simply, you can convincingly argue is no money. We've just had weeks of argument about the Chancellor in deep soup over the budget, unable to tax more, talk of tax rises, and it's like setting off an explosion. Borrowing more is impossible. It would have to come out, if it did come out, of some other part of the health budget, and that could not work either politically or in any other way. But Leda Moran, the chair of the Health Select Committee, her deep worry was the relationship between doctors and the public. Doctors have a warm relationship with the public, a position of trust, which comes with the white coat. We're looking at that now being, she argued, seriously imperilled. Support for the strike, we've all seen, has gone down in the opinion polls, but a strike over Christmas during a flu epidemic in support of a pay rise vastly greater than anything else in the public service, the public in large numbers are just not going to buy it, and they will cease to trust doctors in the way they have.
I mean, I'll be absolutely clear about this. I actually come from a medical family. My father and uncles and aunts and all those were doctors and nurses, and I have nephews and nieces now who are doctors. And certainly the previous generation, they would not contemplate the idea of going on strike. They would say, we are professionals, we have a professional relationship, we have a duty to do no harm, and it's not for us to go on strike, that it's for, organised labour in very different circumstances. And I think the doctors do need to think, I mean, they've done it repeatedly now, gone on strike, but they do have to think long and hard that this will change the way the public thinks about them, that, if you like, the respect and the deference which doctors have received historically. If they keep on going on strike, people will think, well, they're just like, the railway workers or the miners or print workers or whatever. And that is really seriously, I think, downgrading their status in society.
Yeah, I mean, Roy Lilly, the former NHS Trust chairman, was tracing this back to a sort of something like a takeover, not quite his word, but that was his thrust, of the BMA, which was previously, not so very long ago, seen as a professional association and in some way very genteel. Didn't get involved in militant lobbying for pay or other things. But then along came an organised body of doctors campaigning together on the platform of doctors' votes. They did take control of the BMA, and they're running it much more like an old school hardline trade union.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Roy Lilly is a very shrewd man in my experience.
And now we have another very shrewd person, which is Kate.
Oh, you
Borsay,
flatter me.
who comes in for her show at 7:00, and she's here now. Hello, Kate.
Shrewd enough to notice that Adam Bolton's wearing the closest we'll ever see to a Christmas jumper today.
It's a Christmas gilet. I think it's great.
It's a Christmas tank top, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's delightful. I'm feeling rather, well, John, you...
I don't have to, honestly. You might have just got a red
slight sort of Santa Claus vibes from John Pienaar, but that's as far as we'll go. Anna's on a nautical theme and I'm wearing florals in case anyone else is interested. On to this evening's show, though. Talking about the BMA, actually, I've just spoken to the Shadow Health Secretary, Stuart Andrew. He said elements of the BMA leadership are militant. That is his concern. That is what he's had to say. We're also talking quite a bit about vaccine stocks as well, flu vaccine stocks, because there's a huge clamour to get the flu vaccine. Loads of people I know are talking about getting it now because they will develop immunity just in time for Christmas. So there's no doubt about it. There's going to be a huge surge in demand over the weekend. Are our vaccine stocks resilient? Will we have to get to the point where we sort of ration them slightly? And it also comes down to how much you want to pay for one, because, of course, there is no set RRP for a flu vaccine. They range from 18 quid up to 22 quid at the moment, but there could be a bit of opportunism here as well. So all things to consider as we're told about this flu crisis that is gripping us at the moment. We'll talk about the US and Europe with that revelation that US national security document wants to target 4 EU nations to leave the European Union. What that means as that continuing story goes on. Emma Duncan's with us as well, actually, the Times columnist. She's got hold of what she feels is a pretty convincing bit of research from America's National Bureau of Economic Research on the price of Brexit. We've heard a lot, haven't we, over the past week or so, that vote in the Commons the other night about whether rejoining the EU customs union and single market looks like a good idea at the moment. Would that help us out of our economic strife? She's been looking at how much Brexit has cost us and at the different methods of conducting this research and what is reliable or not. We're also going to talk about Chinese state interference as well in the UK. Martin Thorley joins us. He spent several years working for the British Council in China. He then became an academic and now is a real expert in Britain's complex relationship with China. He's written a new book. It's called All That Glistens, Chinese Party State Influence in Britain. He was one of the leading voices, actually, concerning Christine Lee. If you remember, she was the donor that gave Barry Gardner and others hundreds of thousands of pounds. And that really shed a huge light for the first time on how the Chinese state can infiltrate British politics. We'll talk to Martin about this. We'll look at the hold that China has over some of our infrastructure, whether that's airports, Hinkley Point C, that power station that's part funded by the Chinese state. So lots to dig into there. It'll be a really fascinating, maybe concerning conversation with Martin Thorley after 9:30.
Okay, a load's coming up then with the UK after 7 o'clock here on Times Radio. And after the news, we're going to be crossing over to the United States and saying hello again to Sarah Baxter there in New York, one of our favourite observers of US politics and what goes on the other side of the Atlantic. Now, though, it is 6:31. Let's get the news with Tom Noonan.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
And here with me on Pienaar and friends, Adam Bolton and Anna Mihailova, our political editor. And we're joined, as promised, by Sarah Baxter from the Mary Colvin Centre for International Reporting in New York. Welcome back to you, Sarah.
Hello there, John.
Hi, it's lovely to have you here. I mean, there's loads of things that we can talk about. We'll try and get through a fraction of them. I'm going to pick up with the latest lines coming out now on the war in Ukraine, Sarah. I know you've been watching this develop. We've been hearing from Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, after the latest back and forward on a peace deal, if it can be called that. And Zelensky, we now see reported, he's been reporting on the American attitude to getting closer to a deal. And he says America wants Ukraine to withdraw its troops from the Donbass region, that key region in the east, some of which is now occupied by Russia, some of which is still being contested by Ukraine. And we have Zelensky telling us that Washington is now suggesting a compromise in which Ukrainian troops would withdraw from the Donbass. Russian troops wouldn't advance into that territory. Also seems to be suggesting, Sarah, that on the question of ceding territory to Russia, well, Zelensky is suggesting a referendum might be the way forward. That is an answer to Trump saying openly that it's time for Ukraine to look seriously at an election. And maybe that's quite a canny stroke by Zelensky, isn't it, Sarah? Because if there's to be a referendum on conceding territory to Russia, Ukrainians will say no.
Well, that's right. I think that's what Zelensky is counting on. It's very, very interesting, this latest idea of a sort of demilitarized zone in the Donbass and having a free economic zone. You know, we know that the Americans are rather interested in getting their hands on some Ukrainian spoils, I'm sorry to say. But at the same time, if the Russians can be persuaded not to occupy bits of the Donbass that they haven't won by force, and the Americans are willing to back off, seemingly ceding land to Russia for really nothing in exchange for the Ukrainians. This is an interesting compromise and way forward. It does carry risks, as Zelensky himself has suggested. If, say, you had a demilitarized zone in the Donbass where there were neither Ukrainian nor Russian forces, what's actually to stop Russia just bulldozing back in, you know, as soon as it gets the earliest opportunity. But if the Americans are invested in the free economic zone plan, it is possible that that might hold. And then the idea of a referendum where the Ukrainian people say, well, no, they don't want to give up land to the Russians that they've been fighting to keep in Ukrainian hands. Well, this is obviously a potential way forward as well. So, you know, it does look like there's been genuine progress. I don't want to get overexcited.
What do you think about this, Adam?
Well, I think what is most interesting is the way that Zelensky is actually engaging with the American proposals and coming up with counter proposals and responding to them. And I think clearly everything he's doing is designed to defang the original 28-day plan. You know, there is obviously a question about democracy in Ukraine, which is one of the weaknesses that Donald Trump has zoned in on, you know, because they haven't been able to hold elections because they've been in a state of war. My feeling, however, is that the area of the Donbass which is in contention is so strategic in terms of the defense of wider Ukraine that, I mean, as a demilitarized zone, pretty difficult to deliver that and maintain Ukrainian security, because obviously the thought would be that when they saw an opportunity, Russia would roll into it.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what worries Zelensky, no question about it. It's just, it does seem like there's some wiggle room at last that might deliver peace. I mean, at the moment, unfortunately, the Ukrainians are not doing well on the ground, and that is hobbling them as well.
Yes. I mean, engagement is engagement, and it does keep the ball in play, doesn't it? And that you know, maybe changes the mood somewhat. But you know, the conviction on the Ukrainian side, and actually on the European side too, and no doubt some in Washington, is that this is Putin playing the same old games. He does not want a deal. He does not want peace. He wants to keep on doing what he's doing and let everyone else dance around in circles. So maybe there's an inevitability, at the next round of meetings, Sarah, for the ball just to fall once again at the feet of Donald Trump. And the question is going to be the same question. Now, what are you going to do about it? We're still at the impasse. Look at Russia. They're not moving. It's time for you to push. And then the question again is, Mr. President, are you going to do that, Sarah?
Yeah, well, he doesn't really want to push Vladimir Putin at all. I mean, he does want to, collect a peace award, not just a phony one from FIFA. So he does want Putin to give some ground, but he's not at all invested in the Ukrainian side in the way that we would like him to be. And he still is determined to welcome back Vladimir Putin on the big stage where he thinks Russia belongs alongside China and the US. And it's a sort of world view where, the big powers kind of carve up the world between them. Zelensky, I think, though, has made some ground in the sense that only a couple of days ago, Donald Trump was berating Zelensky for not even really having bothered to read the latest peace plan from the Americans. And this is showing that Zelensky's taking their offer seriously, but actually saying this is, we need to have our own interests safeguarded nevertheless. So Zelensky has constantly been trying to do what he can in the face of Trump, who really would rather play with the big boy Russian bad guy. But Ukraine remains popular in America. Americans don't like Putin, no matter how hard Trump tries to make them. And I don't think that Americans will react kindly to Trump completely selling Ukraine down the river.
All right. I mean, and in a moment, I just want to get your thoughts briefly on, Sarah, on how it's playing there, the story of tensions rising in the Caribbean between America and the United States, the seizure of that oil tanker. And what is Donald Trump really up to here? I mean, how far is it just about drug trafficking? How far is it about moving in and trying to get what can be got out of Venezuela, the richest country in oil reserves in the region, one of the richest in the world? This is Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
And here with me, Adam Bolton on Pienaar and Friends, and Anna Mihailova and Sarah Baxter in New York. So I want to come right back to you on this story, still developing story about Venezuela and the storming and seizing of that oil tanker in the Caribbean. The President Trump, is making no secret whatever of this being just another stage in the ramping up of the pressure on Maduro, who he clearly wants out. So much of it is framed, of course, still in the terms of tackling drug trafficking. But of course, there's more to it than that. And the President's also been pretty open about the idea of him eyeing hungrily Venezuela's massive oil reserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, yes.
That is absolutely so. And we've also got the new Nobel Prize winner who's endorsing Trump. And there's an interesting dynamic there too, isn't there? Because she was, given that medal, many people believe, as a kind of implicit rebuke to Donald Trump. She's an opposition figure and a brave one to Nicolas Maduro. She now supports Donald Trump, although, as I say, she was kind of like a walking rebuke, some argue, in the eyes of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. But, from her point of view, it makes, you could argue, perfect sense, because that's the way to get rid of this man, the oppressor that she wants to see out and replace.
Yeah, I think she's been extremely warm about President Trump and kind of dedicated her prize to him anyway when she first got it in hiding. Now, the Wall Street Journal has come out with this amazing cloak and dagger story about how she escaped from Venezuela, passed through, 10 checkpoints disguised onto a small fishing vessel, alerting the United States that they were not one of those ones that they ought to be striking from the air as a drug smuggling boat themselves, and made her way all the way to Norway. Absolutely astonishing story. This is Corina Machado, of course, and she is a right-wing critic of Maduro, and in that sense sees Donald Trump as a natural ally. But there's no question she has enormous popular support, extraordinarily brave woman. And I don't think it was ever right to really read that Nobel Prize as a rebuke to Trump.
You don't share that view, right?
No, I think it was a way of sort of, sidestepping the awkward embarrassment of not giving it to Donald Trump, but giving it to somebody that he wouldn't disapprove of. And her daughter was amazingly eloquent accepting the award. And now, of course, Machado herself has been speaking in Oslo and saying Venezuela has effectively been invaded anyway by Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, drug cartels, prostitution rackets, etc. So, she's clearly not bothered about any rumblings about a US invasion. And meanwhile, Trump has made it very clear that he's an adherent of the old Monroe Doctrine, where anything in America's backyard in the Americas is really the United States' business.
Yes.
And that's what we saw with the rappelling of special forces on board this oil tanker. They seized, $70 million worth of oil cargo, which Trump now says, we'll probably keep. And Maduro's calling piracy. If it isn't a war, it's preciously close to one.
Yeah, and the sort of business motive, to use the word business, not entirely appropriate, is a pretty nakedly clear motive. In some ways, it also goes back to the days of Kissinger and the dealings of the United States in Latin America, moving in and planting leaders here and there, willy-nilly almost. Mm-hmm. And the objection, and I said it very, very clearly, as is the hope and the dream of getting American hands on that oil. I spoke yesterday to Professor Sir Anthony Beaver. He spoke about this as a kind of I don't know, extortion racket. Matthew Syed in his column at the weekend was very blunt about all of this. The weird thing, Adam, is it's now seen as normal.
Yeah, and this is what Donald Trump has managed to do, to kind of completely monetize the presidency for himself and his family. And I think, in fairness to Henry Kissinger, it's important to say that although the United States had a very quite sinister policy of supporting right-wing regimes throughout Latin America, who themselves were quite often involved in smuggling of illicit material and all the rest of it, that I don't think Henry Kissinger or indeed the federal government at the time actually profited directly or sought to extract value from their client states. It was rather the other way around, that they supported governments, and they had a thing called Operation Torture, which was kind of organised rendition and detention of people that they saw as dangerous communists across Latin America, which they did in cooperation with countries including Paraguay and Argentina. But I mean, that was political, and it was America policing its own backyard, but it was motivated by higher politics. This seems to be motivated by crude greed, really, of the country, which does have the greatest oil reserves. Although I have to say, it will be an irony and a problem for those people criticising America if the result of this policy is that Donald Trump installs a Nobel Peace Prize winner as the president of Venezuela, and it will, of course, strengthen his claims for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, I mean, I'm hopping around from one thing to another because there are so many things to hop to and from. Briefly, another story this evening, Sarah, which is some reporting, I think denied by the White House now, of that foreign policy, that global security document published at the weekend, reportedly containing references to Donald Trump wanting to prize European countries, several of them, including well, certainly Hungary, but also Italy, Austria, one or two others, away from the European Union. In some ways unsurprising, but in some ways surprising, as so many things are out of Washington. Have you seen much of that story?
Yeah, it is beginning to play here. Not as much as the idea that there could be a new core 5 group of countries as opposed to G7 of these big powers that wouldn't include Europe at all by the look of it, just China, Russia, Japan, India and America. But that's another topic. This one is also gaining traction. But, really, when you think about it, Britain started it first with Brexit. We're the ones that left the European Union first. This was very much approved of by Donald Trump, who loved the idea. And guess what? He now wants Austria, Hungary, Poland and Italy, which have right-wing governments, to follow suit. Well, he would, wouldn't he? And in fact, this has long been Steve Bannon's master plan. If you remember, one of Trump's big advisors in his first regime, still very influential today. He used to go on a tour of the sort of far right all over Europe, attempting to prize them off. Honestly, it wouldn't even just stop at those 4 countries. Those are the ones that are considered the low-hanging fruit. Yeah. The Republicans are about to give a hero's welcome to an AfD leader in New York soon from Germany. They would like the whole of the European Union to fall apart, as Trump's advisors have made no secret of that in that main national security document. Yeah,
it's surprising, but not surprising. I want to squeeze in one more, which caught our eyes certainly earlier on in this week. The idea, I say it's an idea, it seems to be a plan, I think, for visitors to America in future being obliged to hand over to the border security, well, their devices, their tech devices, for their social media interactions to be studied over a space of 5 years, and their family connections and other connections to be reported to the US border, again, over periods of numbers of years. Now, that is quite a prospect for those wanting to travel to America, Sarah.
Yeah, it's also incredibly off-putting. The American tourism market is already nosediving. I mean, it started with Canada. No Canadian wanted to enter the US. Now people from all kinds of countries all over the world are afraid to enter. And you're soon going to have Britons afraid as well. Who's going to pony up the money for an expensive airfare for a nice holiday in New York or California or the Rockies or wherever, Florida? And face having to hand over 5 years of their social media content. I mean, back in the day, it was considered kind of intrusive for America to ask, have you ever been a communist or whatever? Now it's like, well, we'll be the deciders of whether you've ever said anything rude about Donald Trump in your social media or whatever. And the other thing about, punishing people who are involved in contact verification seems to be punishing messengers who've been trying to verify the truth in our world of disinformation. So this is, not only is it ridiculous in view of the Trump administration's free speech message and insistence that it's the rest of the world that's the censors here, but it's also just so self-harming for America, which has traditionally attracted visitors from all over the world keen to see its many marvels. Well, no longer.
Well, I just would add that, I mean, we can be outraged as much as we like, but all this does is formalise something that's been going on already for nearly a year now. People have had their social media trawled through coming into the US. You see quite a lot of examples of that happening. I think it's just going to make it much more formal. And whatever you say about it, it's clearly a strategy within the Trump administration, and they have had successors on immigration. It is popular internally. And to those people, I think a lot of people will still want to go to New York and all those places, both for travel and for work. And I think, the MAGA view of those people that are turned off by that would just be, well, we don't want you to come anyway.
As I understand it, you simply have to hand over the details of your accounts. Is that right?
Yeah, you just... The thing that's new is that thanks to AI, they can trawl through them very quickly in an instant.
But that's the thing that you put it down. And are they saying they're actually going to go through everyone's account?
Yeah, because they can, because it takes a second now.
Yeah, well, that's a much more thorough form of social media screening and vetting than we have seen. There have been individual cases, haven't there? And some of those have made headlines just in themselves. Now we're talking about a nationwide border policy where everyone going would be liable to that kind of stuff.
And have they defined what would qualify you for disqualification?
I don't think they have, Sarah, have they?
No, they haven't. No, but it's beginning to sound a bit like that surveillance state in China where you have social credit scores for how good a citizen you are, etc. I mean, it's a very unnerving step that is, as Anna said, using AI. These things are very easy to research now, and they're obviously taking steps to stop people trying to scrub anything unfavourable. But also, why should we? America's always been a bastion of freedom.
Well, particularly lecturing Europeans on upholding free speech. It seems quite extraordinary. But, I personally have already, because I'm a journalist, failed to get visas to get to China. And, I'm in my journalism, I've not been exactly praising everything about Donald Trump. I seriously wonder, next time I apply for a visa, whether I'm going to get turned down just because I criticised Trump. What do you think, Sarah?
Well, I think that's a genuine risk, Adam, and he's already vowed to cut back journalism visas from 5 years to 8 months renewable. And it makes me very happy indeed that I'm an American citizen.
Or ashamed.
Well, yeah, no, just in terms of my prospects of, getting in and out of the country. Because, Adam, we're public figures, not in the Donald Trump world fame sense, but everything that we write, quite rightly, or broadcast for that matter, is on the record. It's there. And if people want to trawl through it, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't said anything that A, I don't believe, or B, that I'm ashamed of. But
neither.
And I do dislike the idea of some official trawling through my writings to see if any kind of keywords that are somehow blacklisted come up. I mean, that would be an incredible offence against actually the First Amendment of the American Constitution.
Yeah, you also have to feel for American businesses in hospitality dealing with tourists. I saw a set of graphs the other day from a range of countries in Europe, and Canada was worse. The drop off in visits to America on holiday, on trips from these countries was down, in the case of European countries, I think between 10 and 20%. In the case of Canada, it was even more precipitate. The tourist business near the Canadian border is absolutely on its knees because of people no longer making that short trip across the border for a holiday to wherever it is, for reasons that we can understand. You've got to spare a thought and a tear for those people too. Anyway, we've got a couple of minutes there, so I'm going to ask everyone at this point briefly, their predictions. They can be predictions of any kind you like. They can be shocking, surprising, especially like those ones, or counterintuitive. But whatever it is, let's start with you, Anna. What's your prediction for the end of the press?
Well, Time magazine has just named it Person of the Year. It does its, annual Person of the Year cover. And the person it's chosen, do you know who it is?
I don't.
It's AI, the people behind AI.
Oh God, how predictable!
And the cover is just one of the series of covers, but one of them is just the words AI with sort of scaffolding around it. So I guess they're talking about the scaffolding that built AI. My prediction is that for reasons including the ones we've been discussing and the slightly more sinister uses of AI, in a couple of years that cover will look a little bit foolish.
Do you want to develop that?
No.
Well, can I just jump in on that cover? I had a look at the one of their covers takes off that famous cover of the workers sitting in midair on scaffolding, in old New York. There's a very famous image of the building workers eating their sandwiches and chatting on a sort of girder. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Adam. And but it looks like one of the world's ever fakest AI generated pulled together images.
Makes me feel faintly sick, actually. What's your prediction, Sarah?
Well, I think we're going to see MAGA continue to eat its own. I mean, the troll wars have really begun, and I think that's an indication of we're seeing infighting break out all over within the MAGA movement, not just Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Turning Point USA versus Candace Owen, Tucker Carlson versus, the old right that did actually really like him at one point and were trying to be MAGA. And I think it's going to start eating away at Trump's cabinet. They're fighting like ferrets in a sack at the moment.
All right. Well, we're going to follow that one. What about you, Adam, lastly?
This government will not have any further reform of the House of Lords, in spite of their manifesto.
Yeah, okay. That's probably borne out by about 100 years of history. Thank you so much for that, Adam, and to you, Anna, and to you, Sarah. Thanks so much, and to you for listening. Our producer was Ollie Cole, and it's time to leave. We'll talk to you again next week here on Times Radio. I'm John Pienaar.
UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
Thanks, John. This is the evening edition with Kate Borsay. Coming up.
I'm very concerned with the action of the BMA. They are being irresponsible, in my view.
The negotiations between the government and resident doctors continue. Will they take a deal with no extra pay? The Shadow Health Secretary joins us next. Why does the US have it in for Europe? The fallout fully explained in the Trump dump. Plus our newsmaker interview tonight. An expert on China, Martin Thor.